Number 1.
Dalton Prejean. On July 2, 1977, 17-year-old Dalton Prejean and 3 companions left Rogers Nightclub in Lafayette Parish after a night of drinking. Prejean was driving a 1966 Chevrolet with faulty taillights. Louisiana State Officer, Trooper Donald Cleveland, who was on his way to work, noticed the malfunction and signaled for them to stop. Aware that he was driving without a license, Prejean attempted to switch seats with his brother to avoid detection. Officer Trooper Cleveland observed the maneuver and ordered all occupants out of the vehicle. He then ordered Prejean and 2 of the accomplices back to the car as he began searching his brother. Prejean got angry by how he was searching his brother and retrieved a firearm from under the car seat, approached Officer Cleveland, and shot him twice. They all fled the crime scene but were arrested hours later. After several trials, he was found guilty and sentenced to death. On May 18, 1990, at the Louisiana State Penitentiary, Dalton Prejean was executed by electrocution. In his final statement, he stated, "Nothing is going to be accomplished. I have peace with myself. I'd like to thank all of those who supported me all these years. I'd also like to thank my loved ones for being strong. My son will be a better person for not letting something like this bring down his life. Keep strong, keep pushing, keep praying. They said it wasn't for the revenge, but it's hard for me to see, to understand. I hope they're happy. So I forfeit my life. I give my love to all. God bless." It is notable to know that his son, Prejean Jr., is currently serving a 60-year sentence for the murder of his 14-month-old stepson.
Number 2.
Johnny Frank Garrett. On October 31, 1981, 76-year-old Sister Tadea Benz was found sexually assaulted and murdered in her room at the St. Francis Convent in Amarillo. The brutal nature of the crime shocked the local community. Johnny Frank Garrett, who was 17 at the time and lived across the street from the convent, was arrested after a neighbor reported seeing him near the convent on the night of the murder. Despite his claims of innocence, Garrett was charged with the crime, convicted of murder, and sentenced to death. On February 11, 1992, Johnny Frank Garrett was executed by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit in Texas. In his final statement, he stated, "I'd like to thank my family for loving me and taking care of me. The rest of the world can kiss my ever-loving ass." He was on death row for over 11 years.
Number 3.
Scott Allen Hayne. On October 6, 1987, 17-year-old Scott Allen Hayne and 18-year-old Robert Lambert committed a double murder during a carjacking in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The victims, 27-year-old Michael Houghton and 22-year-old Laura Sanders, were sitting in Sanders' car outside a local bar when Hayne and Lambert approached them with the intent to rob. They held a knife and forced their way into the vehicle and compelled Houghton to drive to a remote location. There, they robbed the victims, forced them into the trunk of the car, and set the vehicle on fire. Despite hearing Houghton and Sanders banging and yelling from the trunk, Hayne and Lambert left the scene, only to return briefly to ensure the fire was burning effectively. After checking, they finally left the victims inside the trunk, resulting to their deaths. After spending the $565 they had stolen, they returned to Tulsa, where authorities apprehended them. On May 1988, Hayne and Lambert were tried and convicted of multiple charges and sentenced to death. On April 3, 2003, Scott Hayne was executed by lethal injection at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester. When asked if he had a final statement, he said no. He was on death row for over 15 years.
Number 4.
Toronto Marquis Patterson. On June 6, 1995, 17-year-old Toronto Marquis Patterson fatally shot his cousin, 25-year-old Kimberly Brewer, and her 2 daughters, 6-year-old Jennifer Brewer and 3-year-old Ollie Brown, during a robbery in Dallas, Texas. Patterson entered Brewer's home intending to steal the custom wheels from a BMW owned by another cousin, Vernon Stiff, which was stored in Brewer's garage. During the robbery, Patterson shot Kimberly Brewer in the living room and her 2 daughters in their bedroom, resulting in their deaths. Notably, Ollie, the younger victim, was found with her hands covering her ears, indicating she was awake during the attack. He then fled the scene with the stolen car wheels. Following his arrest, Patterson was charged with capital murder. Despite being a juvenile at the time of the offense, he was tried as an adult and sentenced to death. During the trial, Patterson's defense argued that his confession was coerced and that he was innocent of the murders. They claimed that 2 Jamaican men had threatened him and his girlfriend, forcing him at gunpoint to assist in the theft of the automobile tires. However, these claims did not sway the jury's decision. Toronto Patterson was executed by lethal injection on August 28, 2002, at the Texas State Penitentiary in Huntsville. In his final word, he stated, "I am sorry for the pain, sorry for what I caused my friends, family, and loved ones. I feel a great deal of responsibility and guilt for what happened." He was on death row for over 7 years.
Number 5.
Douglas Christopher Thomas. At 17, Douglas Christopher Thomas began a relationship with 14-year-old Jessica Wiseman. Their relationship faced strong opposition from Jessica's parents, J.B. and Kathy Wiseman, as they never approved and wanted to keep the couple apart. This led to plans to eliminate them. In the early hours of November 10, 1990, Thomas entered the Wiseman residence in Middlesex County, Virginia. Armed with a firearm, he fatally shot J.B. Wiseman in the head at close range, killing him instantly. The noise woke Kathy Wiseman, but before she could react, Thomas fired again, hitting her in the head and shattering the left side of her face. Despite her severe injury, Kathy Wiseman was still alive. In a desperate attempt to protect her daughter, she staggered down the hallway toward Jessica's bedroom to protect her. When Jessica saw her wounded mother standing in the doorway, instead of helping her, she screamed to Thomas, saying, "Oh God, Chris, please shoot her again." Obediently, Thomas fired a second fatal shot, killing Kathy Wiseman instantly. With both parents dead, Thomas slipped out of the house and returned home. That evening, Thomas confessed to the crimes. He was arrested and charged with capital murder and sentenced to death. On January 10, 2000, Douglas Christopher Thomas was executed by lethal injection at the Greensville Correctional Center in Jarrett, Virginia. In one of his interviews, he stated, "I can't blame the United States. I can't blame Virginia. In a sense, I put myself here. It was a childish decision. I was a child. I'm not a victim of my environment. I'm not a victim of drugs. In the U.S., we live under democracy with freedom of speech, freedom of choice. Unfortunately, I made a bad choice." Thomas spent almost 10 years on death row.
Number 6.
J. Kelly Pinkerton. On September 30th, 1979, 17-year-old J. Kelly Pinkerton broke into the Amarillo, Texas apartment of Sherry Welch, a college student. During the burglary, Pinkerton sexually assaulted Welch and then fatally slashed her throat. Less than a month later, on October 26, 1979, Pinkerton committed a second murder. This time, he entered the home of 32-year-old Sarah Dawn Lawrence while her husband was at work. After sexually assaulting her, Pinkerton used a large knife to slit her throat. Evidence at the scene included a bloody palm print on her leg and another on a nearby coffee table. Footprints leading from the crime scene were traced to an area near Pinkerton's home. Upon questioning, he confessed to both murders in detail. Following his arrest, Pinkerton was charged with 2 counts of capital murder and sentenced to death. All of his appeal for clemency were denied. On May 15, 1986, at the Huntsville unit in Huntsville, Texas, J. Kelly Pinkerton was executed by lethal injection. In his final moments, he addressed his father, saying, "Be strong for me. I want you to know I'm at peace with myself and with my God. Say goodbye to Mom." He then recited a Muslim chant. Pinkerton was on Texas death row for 11 years.
Number 7.
James Terry Roach. On October 29, 1977, 17-year-old James Terry Roach, along with accomplices Joseph Carl Shaw and Ronald Eugene Mahaffey, committed a series of violent crimes in Columbia, South Carolina. The trio spent the morning consuming alcohol and hard pills before deciding to find a girl to sexually assault. They drove to a baseball field where they met 17-year-old Thomas Taylor and 14-year-old Carlotta Hartness sitting in a parked car. Roach aimed a rifle at the teenagers, demanding money. After taking Taylor's wallet, Shaw and Mahaffey forced Hartness into their vehicle. Roach then fatally shot Taylor. The group drove Hartness to a secluded area, where all three men sexually assaulted her. After the assault, Roach and Shaw shot Hartness multiple times, resulting to her death. Following their arrest, Roach pleaded guilty to the crimes. Despite being a juvenile at the time of the offenses and having an IQ between 75 and 80, he was sentenced to death. On January 10, 1986, Roach was strapped into the electric chair at the Broad River Correctional Institution in South Carolina, and he gave his last words. "To the family of the victims, my heart is still with you in your sorrow. May you forgive me, just as I know my Lord has done." At the time of his execution, he was 25 years old.
Number 8.
Gerald Lee Mitchell. On June 4, 1985, of 20-year-old Charles Marino and his brother-in-law, Kenneth Fleming, went to the Acres home area of Houston to buy some smokes. They met 17-year-old Mitchell Gerald in the city park. He offered to sell them the item. Instead, Mitchell led them to a vacant house where he took out a firearm and robbed them. After taking $25 and their car keys from Marino, Mitchell forced them to sit on the floor. He then shot them both from a distance. Fleming survived the gunshot wound, but Marino died. Later that same day, Mitchell shot another individual during a dispute over a necklace. A few days later, Mitchell was arrested and charged with murder. Despite being a minor at the time of the crime, Texas law permitted the death penalty for offenders aged 17 and above. He was convicted and sentenced to death. On October 22, 2001, after spending over 16 years on death row, Gerald Lee Mitchell was executed by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit in Texas. In his final statement, he expressed remorse to Marino's family, stating, "I am sorry for the pain. I am sorry for the life I took from you. I ask God for forgiveness, and I ask you for the same."
Number 9.
Sean Sellers. In the early hours of March 5, 1986, 16-year-old Sean Sellers entered the bedroom of his mother, Vonda, and his stepfather, Lee Bellafato, in their Oklahoma City home while they slept. Wearing only underwear to limit blood spatter on himself, he first shot his stepfather. The shot awoke his mother, whom he immediately shot in the face. He initially attempted to stage the crime scene to appear as a burglary, but eventually confessed to the killings. Sellers stated that his involvement in Satanism and conflicts with his parents led to his actions. Before shooting his parents, Sellers also shot and killed Robert Bauer, a 32-year-old convenience store clerk, during which he claimed that he was under demonic possession at the time of the murder. He was arrested, convicted, and sentenced to death. While on death row, Sellers converted to Christianity and became an outspoken critic of his previous involvement in Satanism. On February 4, 1999, after being on death row for 13 years, Sean Sellers was executed by lethal injection at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester, Oklahoma. In his final moments, he stated, "All the people that are hating me right now and are here waiting to see me die, when you wake up in the morning, you're not going to feel any different. You're going to hate me just as much tomorrow as tonight. When you wake up and nothing has changed inside, reach out to God and He will be there for you. Reach out to God and He will heal you. Let Him touch your hearts. Don't hate all your lives. I love you all."
Number 10.
Napoleon Beasley. On April 19, 1994, Beasley, alongside his three friends Cedric and Donald Coleman, traveled to Tyler, Texas. Prior to this, Beasley told his friends that he might soon be driving a Mercedes to school. On the day of the event, he told them he wanted to go steal the car. They drove his mother's car to Tyler, Texas, and he took a loaded firearm. After several unsuccessful attempts to steal a car from a restaurant, they came across 63-year-old John Luttig, who was returning home with his wife, Bobby. The couple were driving a 10-year-old Mercedes that evening. As the Luddigs parked in their garage, Beasley approached them and grabbed 64-year-old John and threw him to the ground. He then fired one round from his pistol, hitting him in the side of the head, leaving him alive, but severely wounded. Next, he ran around the car to where Mrs. Ludig was getting out of the vehicle and fired at her at very close range, but missed her. She fell to the ground. Apparently believing her to be dead, he returned to her husband and finally shot him at close range, resulting to his death. After the shooting, he searched for the keys to the car and fled the scene without noticing that Mrs. Ludig was still alive. While driving the car, they collided with a tree and abandoned it, and returned back to his mother's car, where he warned his friends not to say anything about the event to anyone. A few days later, Beasley was arrested and charged with capital murder. His two friends later testified against him. Despite his age and lack of prior criminal record, he was convicted and sentenced to death. After exhausting all legal appeals, Napoleon Beasley was executed by lethal injection on May 28, 2002, at the age of 25. In his final statement, he wrote a lengthy statement stating, "The act I committed to put me here was not just heinous, it was senseless. But the person that committed that act is no longer here. I am. I'm not going to struggle physically against any restraints. I'm not going to shout, use profanity, or make idle threats. Understand, though, that I'm not only upset, but I'm saddened by what is happening here tonight. I'm not only saddened, but disappointed that a system that is supposed to protect and uphold what is just and right can be so much like me when I made the same shameful mistake. If someone tried to dispose of everyone here for participating in this killing, I'd scream a resounding no. I'd tell them to give them all the gift that they would not give me, and that's to give them all a second chance. I'm sorry that I am here. I'm sorry that you're all here. I'm sorry that John Ludig died, and I'm sorry that it was something in me that caused all of this to happen to begin with. Tonight, we tell the world that there are no second chances in the eyes of justice. Tonight, we tell our children that in some instances, in some cases, killing is right. This conflict hurts us all. There are no sides. The people who support this proceeding think this is justice. The people that think that I should live think that is justice. As difficult as it may seem, this is a clash of ideals, with both parties committed to what they feel is right. But who's wrong if in the end we're all victims? In my heart, I have to believe that there is a peaceful compromise to our ideals. I don't mind if there are none for me, as long as there are for those who are yet to come. There are a lot of men like me on death row, good men who fell to the same misguided emotions, but may not have recovered as I have. Give those men a chance to do what's right. Give them a chance to undo their wrongs. A lot of them want to fix the mess they started, but don't know how. The problem is not in that people aren't willing to help them find out, but in the system telling them it won't matter anyway. No one wins tonight. No one gets closure. No one walks away victorious.
Number 11.
Charles Francis Rumbaugh. On April 4th, 1975, 17-year-old Charles Francis Rumbaugh entered Michael's jewelry store in Amarillo, Texas, intending to commit robbery. Inside, he encountered the store's owner, 58-year-old Michael Fiorillo. He brought out a firearm and demanded money. During the confrontation, Fiorillo attempted to retrieve a firearm, prompting Francis to shoot him twice, resulting in Fiorillo's death. He then fled the scene with a small amount of cash. The following day, law enforcement officers located him at a residence near the crime scene. As officers approached, he drew a firearm, leading an officer to shoot him in the hand before apprehending him. On May 1975, while awaiting trial, he attempted to end it all by slashing his wrists, but he was rescued. A month later, he made another attempt by overdosing on drugs, but he was still rescued. A few months later, he and two other inmates escaped from the Potter County Jail by cutting through a steel plate and using bed sheets to lower themselves to the ground. They were recaptured shortly after during a routine traffic stop. Despite opportunities for appeals, he chose to forego further legal challenges. expressing a desire to accept his sentence. On September 11, 1985, Charles Rumbaugh was executed by lethal injection in Huntsville, Texas. In his last statement, he addressed friends and supporters saying, "DJ, Lori, Doctor, Wheat, about all I can say is goodbye, and for all the rest of you, although you don't forgive me for my transgressions, I forgive yours against me. I am ready to begin my journey, and that's all I have to say."
Number 12.
Glenn Charles McGinnis. On August 1, 1990, 17-year-old Glenn Charles McGinnis walked into a laundromat managed 30-year-old Lita Ann Wilkerson in Conroe, Texas. His intention was to rob and steal some money from the laundromat. During the robbery, he shot Wilkerson, resulting in her death, and then fled the scene. He was apprehended shortly thereafter and confessed to the crime. Despite being a juvenile at the time of the offense, McGinnis was tried as an adult. In 1991, a jury convicted him of capital murder and sentenced him to death. After many appeals that was denied by the jury, Glenn Charles McGinnis was executed by lethal injection on January 25, 2000, at the Huntsville unit in Huntsville, Texas. He declined to make a final statement before his execution.
Number 13.
Ruben Cantu. On November 8, 1984, 17-year-old Ruben Montoya Cantu and 15-year-old David Garza entered a house under construction in San Antonio, Texas, intending to rob two men, Pedro Gomez and Juan Moreno, who were staying there to protect the property. During the robbery, both victims were shot multiple times. Gomez died at the scene, while Moreno survived despite severe injuries. Cantu and Garza fled, and the case remained unsolved for several months. In 1985, Cantu was arrested after shooting an off-duty police officer in an unrelated incident. Subsequently, Moreno identified Cantu as the shooter in the earlier robbery, leading to Cantu's conviction for capital murder in July 1985. Despite being a juvenile at the time of the crime, he was sentenced to death. Cantu maintained his innocence throughout the trial and appeals. He was executed by lethal injection on August 24, 1993, at the age of 26. In his final moments, he declined to make a last statement. Years after his execution, significant doubts about Cantu's guilt emerged. In 2005, Juan Moreno recanted his testimony, stating he had been pressured by authorities to identify Cantu as the assailant. David Garza, Cantu's co-defendant, also claimed that Cantu was not involved in the crime. These revelations have led to ongoing debates about the potential wrongful execution of Ruben Cantu.
Number 14.
T.J. Jones. On November 13, 1994, 17-year-old T.J. Jones, along with 3 accomplices, carried out a carjacking that led to the death of 75-year-old Willard Davis in Longview, Texas. The group approached Davis under the pretense of seeking a ride. Once inside his vehicle, they forced him to drive to a secluded area. There, Jones shot Davis in the head, resulting in his death. They then fled the scene in Davis's car. He was arrested shortly and charged with capital murder. Despite being a juvenile at the time of the offense, he was tried as an adult and sentenced to death. During the trial, evidence was presented regarding Jones's troubled upbringing, including a history of abuse and neglect, as well as his limited intellectual capabilities, with an IQ of 78. However, these claims couldn't stop his execution. On August 8, 2002, at the Texas State Penitentiary in Huntsville, T.J. Jones was executed by lethal injection. In his final statement, he stated, "I would like to say to the victim's family, I regret the pain I've put you through, and I hope you can get over it someday." He was on death row for 8 years.
Number 14.
Joseph John Cannon. On September 30, 1977, 17-year-old Joseph John Cannon fatally shot 45-year-old Ann Walsh during the course of a robbery. The incident occurred in Bexar County, Texas, where Walsh, a legal secretary and mother of 6, had previously taken Cannon in to help him after he was released from a juvenile detention center. On the day of the crime, Cannon entered Walsh's home under the pretense of visiting her, but soon turned violent. During an argument, Cannon shot Walsh once in the head, killing her instantly. After the shooting, he fled the scene. Following his arrest, Cannon was charged with capital murder. He was tried as an adult and sentenced to death. Joseph John Cannon was executed by lethal injection on April 22, 1998, at the Huntsville unit in Huntsville, Texas. In his final moments, he smiled and said, "I just want to say I hold no grudges and I love everybody. Let's get on with it." He was on Texas death row for over 21 years.
Number 15.
Curtis Paul Harris. On December 11, 1978, 18-year-old Harris, his 18-year-old brother Danny, their friend James Manuel, and Harris's 16-year-old girlfriend Valerie Rencher traveled to Bryan, Texas, intending to visit a friend. Upon finding the friend absent and experiencing car trouble, the group sought assistance from nearby residents but were unsuccessful. As they walked along Sandy Point Road, they met 25-year-old Timothy Murka, who offered them a ride in his pickup truck. Instead of accepting his help, the group forced Murka to drive to a secluded area. There, they robbed him of his belongings. Including his wallet, they fatally beat Timothy to death with a tire iron. 27-year-old Timothy was just being a good Samaritan. After the beating, the group fled the scene in Murka's truck, later abandoning it after stripping it of valuables. Harris was arrested and charged with capital murder. The prosecution's case heavily relied on the testimony of his girlfriend, Valerie Rencher, who, as a juvenile, testified against Harris and the others in exchange for leniency. Curtis Paul Harris was executed by lethal injection on July 1, 1993 at Huntsville, Texas. Harris spent approximately 14 years on death row before his execution.
Number 1. Christopher Plaskin. Christopher Plaskin was 16 years old when he fatally stabbed his classmate, 16-year-old Marin Sanchez, in the hallway of Johnathan Law High School in Milford, Connecticut, on the morning of April 25, 2014. The incident occurred around 7:15 a.m., just hours before the school's junior prom was scheduled to take place. Witnesses reported a chaotic scene in the aftermath of the stabbing as students cried and emergency responders tried unsuccessfully to save Sanchez's life. She was transported to Bridgeport Hospital, where she was pronounced dead from stab wounds. Plaskin and Sanchez had known each other for years. He was described by peers as the class clown, often cheerful and outgoing. He was involved in drama and athletics. However, close friends later revealed that he had struggled with mental health issues, including periods of depression and a previous attempt to hurt himself, although these claims were not officially confirmed. He reportedly harbored a long-standing fixation on Sanchez and had allegedly asked her to prom. At the time of the attack, Sanchez had already made plans to attend the dance with her boyfriend, Jared Butts, a close friend of Plaskin's. Marin Sanchez was active in school activities, a member of the National Honor Society, and had recently posted photos of herself in the dress she planned to wear to the prom. Friends believed this rejection may have triggered the incident, though Plaskin's defense later contested that interpretation. During the attack, a fellow student saw Plaskin on top of Sanchez and attempted to intervene, but was unable to stop the stabbing. Another student witnessed Plaskin throw the bloodied knife aside. He was immediately taken to the principal's office, where he was described as calm but visibly blood-stained. According to the affidavit, when a police officer arrived and asked what happened, Plaskin reportedly stated that he did it, and they should just arrest him. Plaskin was arrested and charged with murder as an adult. He was initially held at Manson Youth Institution in Cheshire, Connecticut, under watch, and was later transferred to a psychiatric hospital for evaluation. His bail was set at $3 million. His attorney indicated early on that the defense was considering a possible mental health strategy. Plaskin was being treated with antipsychotic and anti-anxiety medications and showed signs of psychosis. On June 4, 2014, Plaskin appeared in Milford Superior Court and pleaded not guilty to murder. He waived his right to a probable cause hearing. The defense continued to explore his psychiatric state at the time of the offense. His family, including his mother Kathy and Uncle Paul Healy, attended the hearings and expressed sorrow for the events and grief for both their son and the victim. In March 2016, at age 19, Christopher Plaskin entered a plea of no contest to the murder charge. The court accepted the plea, treating it as a guilty conviction under Connecticut law. On June 6, 2016, Plaskin was sentenced to 25 years in prison with no possibility of parole for the first 13 years in accordance with Connecticut's revised juvenile sentencing statutes. Prosecutors maintained that the attack was connected to Sanchez's rejection of his prom proposal. The defense denied this connection and emphasized Plaskin's deteriorating mental state, describing symptoms of psychosis. Sanchez's parents expressed disappointment with the sentence, believing it was insufficient for the loss of their daughter. Her father, Jose Sanchez, stated after the sentencing that the outcome sent the wrong message about accountability for youth violence. He argued that Plaskin would eventually be released and resume a life that Marin could never reclaim. There were no visible displays of emotion from Plaskin during sentencing. According to court records, he cooperated with the proceedings, but remained largely silent throughout the legal process. Following his conviction, he was transferred to Cheshire Correctional Institution, an adult facility in Connecticut. At the time of the attack, he was 16 years old. Under the terms of the plea agreement, he will be eligible for parole in 2029 when he is 31 years old. Upon release, he will remain under supervision for the remainder of the sentence. As of June 2025, Christopher Plaskin has served 11 years of his 25-year sentence. He remains incarcerated at Cheshire Correctional Institution in Connecticut. He is not eligible for parole until 2029 and has not been released. Number 2, Austin Reed Sigg. Austin Reed Sigg was 17 years old when he abducted and murdered 10-year-old Jessica Ridgway in Westminster, Colorado, on October 5, 2012. At the time, he was a student interested in forensic science and mortuary studies and was attending Arapahoe Community College after earning his GED. Sigg had previously attended Stanley Lake High School but dropped out after the 11th grade. He lived with his mother, Mindy Sigg, in a quiet suburban home. Described by former classmates as intelligent but withdrawn, Sigg had been known for dressing in black, sitting in the goth corner of his school cafeteria, and expressing a fascination with death and mortuary science. On the morning of October 5, 2012, Jessica Ridgway, a 5th grade student at Witt Elementary School, left her home intending to meet a friend so they could walk to school together. She never arrived. Her mother, Sarah Ridgway, who worked night shifts, missed a call from the school and did not immediately realize Jessica was missing. A large-scale community search was launched involving local law enforcement, the FBI, and volunteers. Sigg abducted Jessica as she walked past his parked car. He restrained her with zip ties and transported her to the home he shared with his mother. Investigators later learned that Sigg held Jessica in his room for nearly 2 hours. He first attempted to murder her with the zip ties, but when that failed, he used his hands. When her body continued to show signs of life, he filled a bathtub with hot water and submerged her face until she was dead. Afterward, he methodically dismembered Jessica's body. Some remains were placed in a field in Arvada, while others were hidden inside a crawl space in his home. On October 7th, Jessica's dismembered remains were found in the park in Arvada, confirming that the missing persons case had become a homicide investigation. Days later, on October 10th, her backpack was discovered in the nearby town of Superior. A tuft of blonde hair was also found, though authorities initially did not confirm if it was linked to Jessica. Meanwhile, Sigg remained at large. Authorities eventually connected the murder with a separate attempted abduction that had occurred on May 28, 2012, involving a 22-year-old female jogger near Kettner Lake. In that case, the woman was able to escape, but investigators noted similarities between the two incidents, including a chemical-soaked rag used to subdue the victim. Sigg's arrest came on October 23, 2012, after he confessed to his mother, who immediately contacted authorities. She told dispatchers that he did it, and he gave her details, and her remains were in their house. Sigg was arrested without resistance and taken into custody at the Westminster Police Department. He waived his rights and cooperated with police. He confessed on a recorded 911 call, saying that he murdered Jessica Ridgway, and he has proof that he did it. DNA evidence tied Sigg to the crime, including material found on Jessica's backpack. During interrogation, he also admitted to using the internet to research homemade chloroform for the earlier attack on the jogger. Despite initially denying sexual assault evidence and testimony, revealed that he forced Jessica to change into his clothes, cut her hair, and was aroused in an intimate way during the dismemberment process. He was charged as an adult with 15 counts, including first-degree murder, kidnapping, assault of a child, and charges related to the attempted abduction of the jogger. Because he was 17. At the time of the crime, he was ineligible for the death penalty. In February 2013, he pleaded guilty to all charges in order to avoid trial. On November 19, 2013, the district judge sentenced him to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 40 years. He also received an additional 86 years for the remaining charges. Jessica's mother, Sarah Ridgway, chose not to address the court directly about Sigg, stating that once the trial ended, she intended to forget his name and focus only on Jessica's legacy. A slideshow of Jessica's life played in the courtroom, showing her as a smiling, energetic young girl. Throughout most of the proceedings, Sigg displayed little emotion. He cried only once when the victim impact statements were read. His defense attorney, Ryan Lower, argued that because Sigg was legally a juvenile at the time of the crime, he should be given a sentence that allowed for parole. He also referenced Sigg's difficult upbringing, including claims that Sigg's mother inhaled paint during pregnancy, and that he experienced physical trauma at birth. Psychologist Anna Salter testified that he was sadistic and lacked empathy, further describing the killing as calculated. Sigg did not give a full personal statement during sentencing, but acknowledged in court that he had done wrong. He also accepted the condition that he would have no contact with Jessica's family and would pay over $8,300 in restitution. As of March 2025, Austin Reed Sigg remains incarcerated at the Colorado State Penitentiary in Canyon City, Colorado. He has served 12 years of his life sentence and will not be eligible for parole until 2052, when he will be 57 years old. Number 3. Nickalas Kedrowitz. Nickalas Kedrowitz was 13 years old when he brutally murdered his two younger siblings in separate incidents that occurred less than 3 months apart in the family's home in Osgood, Indiana. On May 1, 2017, paramedics responded to an emergency call at the home where Nickalas lived with his mother, Christina McCartney, his stepfather, Stephen Ritz, and several siblings. The call was made after Nickalas alerted his mother that his 23-month-old half-sister, Desiree McCartney, was not acting right and wasn't breathing. When Christina returned home from work, she found Nickalas holding Desiree wrapped in a towel. According to statements given to investigators, Christina began performing CPR while Stephen contacted emergency services. Desiree was transported to Margaret Mary Health and later transferred to Cincinnati Children's Hospital, where she died 5 days after the incident. At the time, the cause of her condition was unclear, but child welfare officials and the Indiana State Police launched an investigation. Meanwhile, the family continued to live together in the same residence. Less than 3 months later, on July 20th, 2017, another call was made to paramedics. This time it involved 11-month-old Nathaniel Ritz, Nickalas' stepbrother. According to statements given during the investigation, Christina had asked Nickalas to help put Nathaniel to bed. Shortly afterward, he again told her that something was wrong with the child. Nathaniel was taken to Margaret Mary Health, but was pronounced dead the following morning. Following the second death, investigators began to re-examine the circumstances surrounding both fatalities more closely. Information was gathered from relatives and others who reported that Nickalas had made concerning remarks and exhibited troubling behavior in the months leading up to and following the deaths. Several individuals told investigators about instances of animal cruelty, including one case in which Nickalas severely injured a kitten at his great-aunt and great-uncle's home. He allegedly spoke about wanting to see the animal's brain splattered everywhere. He also made disturbing remarks to his great-aunt about her health, suggesting she just needed to die. On December 13, 2017, Indiana State Police conducted a formal interview with him. During this questioning, the teen described having dreams involving angels and referenced saving his siblings from hell and the chains of fire. He told investigators that he had put a towel over Desiree's head to set her free to heaven, and similarly placed a blanket over Nathaniel's head. The court proceedings that followed were complex and delayed, in part due to questions regarding his mental competency. 5 doctors evaluated him. 3 concluded he was not competent to stand trial, while 2 found that he was. The presiding judge in Ripley County ultimately sided with the minority opinion, ruling that the case would proceed in adult court. Defense attorneys argued that Nickalas had long-standing, untreated mental health problems and lacked a clear understanding of his actions. However, prosecutors insisted he was aware of the consequences of what he had done. The criminal trial concluded in August 2021, when he was convicted on 2 counts of murder. He faced a possible sentence of up to 65 years for each count. On February 2, 2022, Ripley County judge sentenced him to 50 years in prison for each murder to be served consecutively. The judge stated that the time elapsed between the 2 deaths and the calculated nature of the acts warranted consecutive sentences. This brought the total sentence to 100 years in prison. During sentencing, the prosecution noted Kedrowitz had shown no remorse in the months and years following the murders. His mother, Christina McCartney, described the situation as devastating, acknowledging that 2 of her children were gone, 1 dead and 1 imprisoned for life. In interviews prior to the sentencing, she expressed sorrow over her children's deaths and said she had nightmares imagining what they might have experienced. She stated that she had never witnessed signs of violence in Nickalas before the crimes, describing him as a quiet, intelligent boy who did well in school. Nickalas was transferred to the Indiana Department of Correction following sentencing. Due to the nature of the crimes and the defendant's age, he was placed in a facility suitable for young adult offenders. He is currently serving his sentence at the Wabash Valley Correctional Facility, a high-security prison located in Carlisle, Indiana. As of March 2025, Nickalas Kedrowitz has served just over 3 years of his 100-year sentence. He will not be eligible for parole under Indiana law and is expected to remain incarcerated for the remainder of his life. He was 13 years old at the time of the crimes and will be 113 years old if he serves the full sentence. Number 4, Kyle Anger. On the night of October 18, 2017, 5 teenage boys from Genesee County, Michigan, drove to the Dodge Road overpass above Interstate 75 near Vienna Township. Among them was 17-year-old Kyle Anger, who had just graduated from high school and was the oldest in the group. What started as a reckless prank, the teens referred to as dinging, which was the act of throwing rocks at passing vehicles, quickly turned into a fatal crime. According to investigators, the group brought approximately 20 rocks with them, some weighing up to 20 pounds. They threw them from the overpass at vehicles traveling beneath on I-75. Several cars were hit, but one rock weighing 6 pounds crashed through the windshield of a van driven by a man commuting home from work. That man was 32-year-old Kenneth White, a father of 4, and engaged to be married. The rock struck him in the face and chest, fracturing his skull and clavicle, and rendering him unconscious. He was transported to Hurley Medical Center in Flint, where he was later pronounced dead. The cause of death was ruled as blunt force trauma. According to Genesee County prosecutor, it was Kyle Anger who threw the fatal rock. He also provided the vehicle the teens used to drive to the overpass. After the incident, the group reportedly went to McDonald's for food, not yet realizing the extent of the consequences. The Michigan State Police and Genesee County Sheriff's Office launched a joint investigation, collecting evidence from the scene and reviewing surveillance footage. Public tips also played a critical role. Within a few days, the 5 teens were arrested and charged as adults. They were identified as 17-year-old Kyle Anger, 16-year-old Mark Sikelski, 15-year-old Trevor Gray, 16-year-old Mikaden Payne, and Alexander Miller. 15. Anger was charged with second-degree murder, conspiracy to commit second-degree murder, and multiple counts of malicious destruction of property. He was held separately from the other 4 and was the only one who did not initially accept a plea deal. All 4 of the other defendants later agreed to plead guilty to reduced charges of manslaughter in exchange for testifying against Anger. Prosecutors made this arrangement to secure a conviction against the person alleged to have directly caused Kenneth White's death. In court documents, the others stated that it was Anger who picked up the largest rock and threw it moments before the impact. Anger ultimately pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. At his sentencing in October 2019, the judge sentenced him under manslaughter sentencing guidelines, which allowed for a reduced sentence of 39 months to 20 years in prison. The judge credited Anger with 2 years of time already served in county jail while awaiting trial. In his own statement to the court, Anger expressed regret, stating that, he can only hope that Mr. White's family and the community will be able to forgive him for my actions." The prosecution emphasized that the tragedy was a direct result of a reckless, senseless act, stating that, "When youths are idle, bad things can happen." As of May 2025, Kyle Anger has served approximately 7.5 years in custody, including jail time prior to his sentencing. He remains incarcerated and is eligible for parole based on his minimum sentence of 39 months. He was 17 years old at the time of the crime and will be 25 years old in May 2025. No public records currently indicate whether he has been granted parole or remains in prison under his maximum term of 20 years. Number 5. Andrea Balcer. Andrea Balcer, formerly known as Andrew Balcer, was 17 years old at the time of the incident. He was living in Winthrop, Maine, with his parents, Alice and Antonio Balcer, both aged 47, and her older brother, Christopher. Andrea was an academically successful student with no prior criminal record. He was in the process of grappling with his gender identity, identifying as a transgender woman, and had reportedly expressed feelings of isolation and lack of family support regarding her transition. In the early hours of October 31st, 2016, on a Halloween night, Andrea committed a violent attack against his parents inside their family home. According to the 911 call and subsequent police interviews, the assault began around 1 a.m. inside Andrea's room. He took a military-style knife and first used the knife on his mother, Alice Balcer, from behind while she was hugging him. When his mother screamed out of pain, his father, Antonio Balcer, woke up and rushed to the scene to investigate. He was then brutally attacked and used a knife on for multiple times by Andrea in the living room. Both parents then died to their injuries. After murdering his parents, he also murdered the family's chihuahua, stating that the dog was barking a lot throughout the crime period. He then approached his older brother, Christopher, who had emerged from his room but allowed him to leave the house unharmed. Christopher later testified that he told him that it wasn't his day to be murdered yet before letting him go. Christopher then flee the residence and seek help from neighbors. After the whole incident, Andrea called 911 herself and told the dispatcher that he had snapped and murdered her parents. During initial police questioning, he expressed confusion and an inability to fully understand her actions. He was arrested at the scene and taken into custody. During the investigation, he revealed that he had long struggled with gender identity. He told authorities that she identified as a woman and had experienced emotional distress due to a lack of acceptance from his family. He later claimed that his mother was abusive and that his father was unaccepting of his gender identity, though these claims were strongly disputed by family members and family friends. Despite being 17 at the time of the crime, he was charged and tried as an adult. He was indicted on 2 counts of intentional or knowing murder and 1 count of aggravated cruelty to animals. His legal counsel entered a guilty plea under an agreement that capped the maximum sentence at 55 years. The sentencing took place in Augusta, Maine. The court considered several mitigating factors, including his young age, lack of prior criminal record, strong academic performance, and his admission of guilt and acceptance of responsibility. However, the court ultimately rejected arguments that his gender identity struggles should be treated as a mitigating circumstance. The judge stated that while many transgender individuals face similar societal and familial challenges, these issues cannot justify violent actions. During the sentencing, Andrea addressed the court and asked for forgiveness. She was emotional throughout the proceedings, often looking down, wiping away tears, and taking notes as others spoke. The sentencing hearing included impact statements from surviving family members. Christopher Balcer, Andrea's brother, called his explanations flimsy and stated that leniency would only serve to endanger the public. He emphasized that in his view, his brother showed no genuine remorse. Other relatives strongly described the accusations of abuse and rejection as untrue. After much deliberation, Andrea Balcer was then sentenced to 40 years in prison. Following sentencing, he was transferred to the Maine Department of Corrections. He is currently serving his sentence at the Maine Correctional Center in Windham, Maine. Given that he was sentenced to 40 years in 2018 at the age of 20, he will be eligible for release in 2058. At that time, he will be approximately 60 years old, assuming no early release or parole is granted. As of now, Andrea Balcer has served approximately 7 years of his 40-year sentence. Number 6. Cameron Moffett. On March 18, 2010, 18-year-old Kimberly Proctor was lured to a home in Langford, British Columbia, where she was abducted, tortured, and murdered by 2 of her classmates, 17-year-old Cameron Moffett and 16-year-old Cruz Wellwood. The case was one of the most disturbing in Canadian juvenile crime history due to the level of premeditation and brutality involved. Kimberly Proctor had previously been bullied and isolated in school. She was described as a sensitive, animal-loving teenager who had been targeted by peers, including Wellwood and Moffett. On the day of the murder, Kimberly was contacted by Wellwood through MSN Messenger. He told her he had something to share regarding a mutual acquaintance. She still had feelings for which was used as a ruse to lure her to the house he shared with his mother. Once Kimberly arrived, she was overpowered by Moffett and Wellwood. She was bound with duct tape, assaulted, beaten, and tortured for several hours before being suffocated. Following her death, the pair placed her body in a freezer. Later, they transported her remains in a hockey bag on public transit to the Galloping Goose Trail, which was a popular hiking path. There, they set her body on fire. The crime was extensively premeditated. Investigators later uncovered a massive digital trail left by the perpetrators. Their online activities included violent and sadistic watch history, explicit conversations about assault fantasies, and Google searches on topics such as organ insides, bone fracture, and camp fuel. Days before the murder, they used Google Maps to locate potential body disposal sites. Cruz Wellwood even asked a contact in an online game what she would think if he acted out his fantasies in real life, saying he would target a random person for shits and giggles. One of the key pieces of digital evidence came shortly after the crime. Wellwood, while cleaning up after the murder, sent a suspicious message to a friend saying, "Sorry, the freezer was jumping around." He later confessed to a girl he met on World of Warcraft, providing local news links to verify his claim. After Kimberly's body was discovered the following day, March 19, 2010, police began a comprehensive investigation. Digital forensic specialists collected the equivalent of 1.4 billion pages of online evidence. Authorities also monitored Facebook groups and online discussions where friends speculated about who may have been responsible. Moffat and Wellwood were eventually arrested and interviewed over the course of 2 days. Audio recordings of a conversation between the two, captured during a sheriff's van transport, were presented in court. The two teens were heard laughing and discussing trivial matters. Wellwood expressed annoyance at Moffat for speaking too openly to the police. In court, both teenagers pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and indignity to human remains. They were sentenced as adults in April 2011 to life imprisonment with no chance of parole for 10 years. At the time of sentencing, Cameron Moffat was 18 years old. As of May 2025, Cameron Moffat has served 14 years in prison. He remains incarcerated. His application for day parole was denied in early 2024. While he has reportedly completed some rehabilitative programs, the parole board found that he continued to minimize his actions and had not taken full responsibility for his role in the murder. A psychological assessment classified him as high risk to reoffend. Although he was granted escorted temporary absences for limited outings, full parole and day parole were not approved. If released after the minimum eligibility period, he would be 28 years old. Kimberly Proctor's family continues to attend parole hearings and has publicly stated that life imprisonment should mean life. Her father, Fred Proctor, told the media in 2024 that first-degree assault and murder shouldn't have to come to parole hearings 14 years later, indicating that Moffat should stay in jail forever. Number 7. Brogan Rafferty. Brogan Rafferty was 17 years old when he was convicted in 2012 for his role in a series of murders linked to a Craigslist job scam in Ohio. He lived in Stowe, Ohio, and was known to have a difficult upbringing. His mother struggled with addiction, and his father was largely absent due to demanding work hours. Rafferty was described by some as quiet and intelligent, but his teenage years were marked by instability and poor guidance. Between late 2011 and early 2012, he became involved in a criminal scheme led by 53-year-old Richard Beasley, a man he had been acquainted with through church. Beasley devised a plan to lure vulnerable men to rural areas with fake job offers posted on Craigslist. The job postings advertised a caretaker position on a remote cattle farm in Noble County, Ohio. The offer promised housing and modest pay, appealing to older unemployed men. Rafferty's role was to assist Beasley in meeting the victims and transporting them to isolated locations under the guise of job interviews. Authorities later determined that 4 men were targeted: 56-year-old Ralph Geiger, 51-year-old David Pauley, 47-year-old Timothy Kern, and 49-year-old Scott Davis. Of the 4 victims, only Davis survived. On separate occasions, Rafferty and Beasley met each victim, had breakfast with them, and drove them to the supposed farm. Once in the woods, Beasley would lead the men away under the pretense of showing them equipment. He will then shoot them. Davis testified in court that he became suspicious after hearing a firearm cock behind him. He turned and managed to push the weapon away after being shot in the arm. Davis escaped into the woods and found help at a nearby house, which ultimately led to the unraveling of the plot. Geiger, Pauley, and Kern were each shot and buried in shallow graves in the woods. The victims had been chosen due to their vulnerable backgrounds, unemployed, single, and isolated, making their disappearances less likely to draw immediate attention. Though the clear motive behind these murders still remains unknown, authorities believe that robbery was the driving force. Rafferty was arrested in 2011 and tried as an adult. The trial took place in Summit County Common Pleas Court in Akron, Ohio. The jury consisted of 7 women and 5 men. Over several weeks, prosecutors laid out a case that characterized Rafferty as a student of violent crime, citing his internet search history, which included phrases like first kill and Sopranos first whack. Prosecutors emphasized that while Beasley pulled the trigger, Rafferty knowingly assisted in the planning and execution of the crimes. He was charged with 25 counts, including aggravated murder, attempted murder, aggravated robbery, kidnapping, and abuse of a corpse. He was acquitted of only one charge of identity theft. Rafferty's defense argued that he was a scared and a manipulated child who acted under duress. They presented the relationship between Beasley and Rafferty as one of coercion, citing threats Beasley allegedly made against Rafferty's mother and sister. The defense claimed Rafferty did not initially know of the murder plot and was too frightened to report Beasley after witnessing the first murder. However, prosecutors countered that he had multiple opportunities to leave or seek help and instead chose to stay involved. Scott Davis, the surviving victim, served as the key witness for the prosecution and identified Rafferty as Beasley's accomplice. Jurors took 20 hours over 4 days to deliberate. They reviewed Rafferty's recorded interviews with police and found contradictions in his statements. The juries acknowledged the difficulty of convicting someone so young, but concluded that the evidence proved his active involvement. On November 5, 2012, Brogan Rafferty was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He stood silently in court during the sentencing, showing no outward emotion. Since his conviction, Rafferty has been incarcerated at the Mansfield Correctional Institution in Ohio. As of May 2025, he has served over 13 years of his life sentence. Due to the nature of his sentencing, he is not eligible for release. If laws remain unchanged and no appeals are successful, he will spend the remainder of his life in prison. At the time of his conviction, he was just 17. If he were ever hypothetically eligible for release, he would be well into his 60s or 70s before any parole consideration. Number 8. Carlos Reales. Dominguez Carlos was a former student at the University of California, Davis. He is originally from Oakland and living in Tracy, California. In high school, he was regarded as academically strong and socially well-adjusted. However, during his first year at UC Davis, he began to show signs of severe mental health decline. He lost his job, separated from his girlfriend, and struggled with academic and financial stress. In December 2022, he searched online for and purchased a Smith & Wesson tactical knife. According to prosecutors, this was the same weapon later used in a series of knife attacks that occurred between April 27th and May 1st, 2023 in Davis, California. These attacks resulted in 2 deaths and 1 serious injury. The first incident occurred on April 27, 2023, when 50-year-old David Breaux was found deceased on a bench in Central Park. He had been brutally attacked and stabbed 31 times. Investigators recovered a knife sheath at the scene later matched by DNA to Dominguez. Surveillance footage and cell phone data placed Dominguez in the area before the attack. 2 days later, on April 29, 2023, 20-year-old Karim Abu Najm was also fatally stabbed in Sycamore Park while riding his bicycle. A nearby physician heard screams and attempted to help Najm, but the wounds were fatal and he couldn't help out. DNA evidence from the scene and a stolen bicycle also connected to Dominguez. After the second attack on May 1, 2023, 64-year-old Kimberly Guillory was also attacked while inside her tent in downtown Davis. She was also brutally stabbed 3 times and survived. She later testified that she initially thought she was being punched until she saw blood. Bystanders came to her aid, and a 911 call was placed. Guillory identified him as her attacker, and he was arrested shortly after the 3rd attack. Officers found him sitting on a park bench in Sycamore Park. He gave a false name and had visible injuries on his hands. A knife recovered during his arrest carried DNA from both Najm and Guillory. Following his arrest, he was initially deemed unfit for trial due to a diagnosis of schizophrenia and was transferred to Atascadero State Hospital, where he remained for nearly 4 months. He received court-ordered antipsychotic treatment and was later ruled competent to stand trial in January 2024. The trial began in May 2025 in Yolo County Superior Court under Judge Samuel McAdam. During the trial, his surviving victim Guillory testified in the courtroom, and her 911 call was also played. However, the defense challenged her recollection during cross-examination, suggesting her memory might have been affected by trauma and external influence. Guillory rejected that claim. Dominguez did not testify during the trial. His demeanor in court was described as quiet and attentive. He appeared well-groomed and wore formal attire. As of today, Carlos Reales Dominguez's trial is still in progress, and no sentencing has occurred yet. Number 9. John Catahis. John Catahis was 16 years old when he committed the murder of 47-year-old ABC News radio journalist George Weber on March 20, 2009, inside Weber's Carroll Gardens apartment in Brooklyn, New York. The two had arranged to meet through an ad posted by Weber on Craigslist, in which he sought a partner for a consensual BDSM encounter involving bondage and breath control. Catahis responded to the ad and agreed to meet Weber for the sum of $60. That evening, the encounter turned fatal. Catahis had a troubled history. At the time of the crime, he was living in Queens and attending high school intermittently. Described in online profiles as a knife enthusiast, he maintained a MySpace page displaying photos of himself holding large blades. He also described himself using terms such as extremist, anarchist, and sadomasochist. Authorities later confirmed that he collected knives and swords. His behavior and interests raised concerns about his mental state and impulsivity, especially given his age and the violent nature of the crime. According to police reports and courtroom testimony, Catahis arrived at Weber's apartment on the evening of March 20th. During the encounter, Weber's ankles were bound with duct tape. At some point, the interaction escalated. Catahis later claimed that Weber introduced a knife and that the stabbing was done in self-defense during a struggle. However, forensic evidence and the autopsy report contradicted this account. Weber had been stabbed more than 50 times. He suffered 8 deep stab wounds to the neck, 3 to the head, and multiple defensive wounds on his hands. Additional injuries to the chest and back were also recorded. Prosecutors argued that the level of violence demonstrated a deliberate intent to murder. Catahis fled the scene and went into hiding. He was apprehended 5 days later at a friend's apartment in Queens. He was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. During questioning, he appeared unrepentant. In a videotaped police interview played in court, he described that the knife entered Weber's body during a struggle, but continued to downplay his actions. At times, he appeared to treat the interview casually, even smirking and winking at the camera. He admitted to being a knife collector and stated that he liked his swords and knives. He was tried as an adult in Brooklyn Supreme Court. His first trial in 2010 ended in a mistrial due to a hung jury. 11 jurors voted for conviction, but one juror held out citing doubts about intent. A retrial was held in 2011. This time, the jury found Catahis guilty of second-degree murder. The court rejected his claims of self-defense, emphasizing the excessive number of stab wounds and the physical restraint of the victim. At sentencing, the judge handed down the maximum sentence of 25 years to life in prison. Kedrowitz appeared in court wearing a suit and tie with his hair shaved short. During the proceeding, he addressed the court briefly, stating that he was sorry and he regrets the death of George Weber. This statement marked the first time he publicly expressed remorse. Despite the brutal nature of the crime, George Weber's family members showed a measure of grace. Following sentencing, Kedrowitz was transferred to the custody of the New York State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision. He has been housed at multiple facilities, but is currently serving his sentence at Clinton Correctional Facility, a maximum security prison in Dannemora, New York. He was 16 years old at the time of the crime, and if released at the earliest possible date, he would be approximately 41 years old. As of March 2025, John Kedrowitz has served approximately 16 years of his 25 years to life sentence. Number 10, Isaiah Sweet. Isaiah Sweet was a 17-year-old teenager from Manchester. He had been living with his grandparents, 55 years old Richard Sweet and his grandmother, 62-year-old Janet Sweet. They were his legal guardians and had raised him since he was 4 years old due to difficulties within his immediate family. According to his later confession, Sweet felt mistreated by his grandparents, stating that his grandfather constantly told him lots of unkind words, including telling him to fall off the earth, and that they both treated him badly. Sweet was known in his community as a troubled youth with a history of behavioral and emotional struggles. Prior to the crime, he was a high school student and was described by classmates as withdrawn and sometimes angry. The incident that led to his arrest occurred around May 11th, 2012, when he took his grandfather's firearm and brutally shot him in the head from behind. He then also shot his grandmother in the same manner. After the murder, he remained in the house for several days, with the bodies still inside. During this period, he reportedly hosted friends at the home and made no mention of the crime. On May 13, 2012, 2 days after the murders, family members who had been unable to reach the grandparents became concerned and contacted police. Upon police arrival on the Mother's Day, they discovered the bodies and began an immediate search for Isaiah, who was not at the residence at that time. He was eventually located and arrested in Davenport, Iowa, one day after the bodies were found, following an intense manhunt during which he fled from police on foot in a wooded area of Cedar Rapids. According to the investigation, the shootings were not spontaneous, but were premeditated. Law enforcement found messages left on his Facebook page around the time of the murders suggesting his intentions and reflections on the act. Following his arrest, he was transported back to Delaware County for questioning and subsequently charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. The trial process began, but due to his age, the case drew significant legal attention. Although 17 at the time of the crime, he was charged as an adult under Iowa law. His legal team attempted to present mitigating factors, including his mental health history and troubled upbringing, but prosecutors emphasized the deliberate nature of the murders and his actions in the aftermath. In 2014, Isaiah Sweet pled guilty to both counts of first-degree murder. During sentencing, the Delaware County District Court considered the premeditated nature of the crimes and Sweet's lack of remorse. The judge considered that mandatory life without parole sentences for juveniles were unconstitutional. However, after much review, the court determined that Sweet's crimes demonstrated an irreparable corruption that warranted the harshest penalty available. After much deliberation, Isaiah was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge indicated that Sweet was extremely dangerous and would continue to be a threat to society if released. Following the sentencing, Sweet showed minimal visible reaction in the courtroom. According to courtroom records and witness accounts, he appeared calm and did not offer any apology to the family members of the victims during the hearing, incarcerated within the Iowa Department of Corrections. As of 2025, he has served his approximately 13 years in custody, including time spent in juvenile detention prior to his transfer to adult prison. Number 11. Michael Gavin Campbell. Michael Gavin Campbell was 17 years old when he was involved in the fatal shooting of 16-year-old Shayna Rithaler in Sturgis, South Dakota. The two teenagers had met several weeks earlier on an online dating platform called Badoo. They maintained communication through digital messaging and eventually arranged to meet in person. Shayna, who lived in Moorcroft, Wyoming, expressed intentions to run away from home and live with Campbell at his residence in Bloxburg, a small community near Sturgis. On October 3, 2019, Shayna was seen getting into a vehicle outside a coffee shop in Moorcroft. That vehicle, later confirmed to be a Jeep driven by Campbell, transported her across state lines into South Dakota. The two arrived at Campbell's home, which he shared with his mother. At some point after arriving, the two got into an argument. The nature of the dispute was not detailed in court records, but during the altercation, Campbell retrieved a firearm believed to be his mother's and shot Shayna once in the head in the basement of the residence. He later admitted there was no intention to murder her prior to the moment of the shooting. After the shooting, Campbell did not report the incident. Shayna's disappearance prompted a missing person report, and an investigation was opened in Wyoming. Authorities traced the last known interactions and communications from Shayna's phone, leading to the identification of Campbell as a person of interest. Law enforcement from South Dakota and Wyoming coordinated efforts. On October 6th, police located Campbell and his vehicle in the Deadwood area, but Shayna was not with him. The following day, October 7th, her body was discovered by Meade County Sheriff's deputies in the basement of the home where Campbell lived. Campbell was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. He initially pleaded not guilty and not guilty by reason of insanity. Defense attorneys also considered the possibility of transferring the case to juvenile court, which would have imposed a significantly reduced sentence if granted. In May 2020, Campbell accepted a plea agreement. He pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter, a Class C felony under South Dakota law. Prosecutors stated that the plea was appropriate because the shooting occurred without premeditation or design to kill. As part of the plea deal, the original second-degree murder charge was dismissed, and both parties agreed to recommend a sentence of 55 years in prison. When asked by the judge if he had any justification for the act, Campbell responded, no. He also waived his right to challenge the search of his home and phone, and to suppress statements made to law enforcement. Additionally, he agreed not to appeal his conviction or sentence. He acknowledged that he understood he would not be eligible for juvenile sentencing, and that the judge was under no obligation to follow the recommended prison term. Sentencing took place in July 2020. The judge sentenced him to 55 years in the South Dakota State Penitentiary. The sentence includes a condition that he undergo chemical and alcohol treatment while incarcerated. He was also ordered to pay $11,000 in restitution, including $2,500 to Shayna Rithaler's family. He was further prohibited from having any contact with the victim's family for life. During the sentencing hearing, members of Shayna's family delivered victim impact statements. Her younger sister expressed fear that Campbell could harm other family members in the future. The family also conveyed confusion over why Campbell had committed the crime and how he was able to carry on daily activities for several days while the victim's body remained hidden in his home. Under the terms of the sentence, Campbell will be eligible for parole after serving only 27 years. If released at the earliest opportunity, he would be 44 years old. He was initially held at a juvenile facility in Rapid City before being transferred to the South Dakota State Penitentiary in Sioux Falls, where adult male offenders serve long-term sentences. As of March 2025, Michael Gavin Campbell remains incarcerated at the South Dakota State Penitentiary. He has served 5 years of his 55-year sentence. He will become eligible for parole in 2047. Number 12, George Robert Stewart. George Robert Stewart IV was 17 years old when he was charged in the murder of his 91-year-old neighbor, Paul Monchnik. At the time of the crime, George was a high school sophomore living in Romulus, Michigan, where he was known as an athlete and student at Romulus High School. He had temporarily moved in with his grandfather on Detroit's west side just days before the incident, while his mother was relocating. He had no known history of violent crime prior to the incident. In the early hours of November the 23rd, 2015 first responders were called to a house fire at the residence of Paul Monchnik, a retired television repairman and World War II veteran. The fire had fully engulfed the home by the time authorities arrived. After the flames were extinguished, Monchnik's body was discovered near the front entrance. He had suffered extensive burns and showed visible signs of trauma, including head injuries and lacerations. Detroit Fire Department lieutenant who investigated the scene testified that the fire originated at the location where the body was found and appeared to have been intentionally set. A subsequent investigation revealed that a young man had been captured on surveillance video purchasing gasoline at a nearby station shortly before the fire. Monchnik's van, which was missing from the property, was also caught on camera being driven by a person matching the same description. Two of Stewart's family members, his aunts Denise Clanton and Diane Jones, recognized him in the surveillance footage aired on the news and notified police. A school resource officer at Romulus High School also identified Stewart from the footage with certainty. Following these identifications, Stewart's grandfather, George Stewart Jr., turned him in to the police. He later expressed disbelief and sorrow over the situation, stating that he had only agreed to look after his grandson to help him remain in school. According to prosecutors, Stewart attempted to rob Monchnik's home and attacked the elderly man when he was unexpectedly encountered. After beating him, Stewart allegedly took Monchnik's van to a gas station, purchased gasoline, returned to the house, and used the fuel to set the victim and the home on fire. An autopsy conducted by the Wayne County Medical Examiner revealed that Monchnik had suffered head trauma and burns. Accelerant was found in his stomach, suggesting he may have been forced to ingest it. At Stewart's arraignment, Wayne County prosecutor described the crime as heinous, emphasizing the brutality involved. Initially charged with first-degree murder, felony murder, and arson, Stewart later pleaded guilty to second-degree murder on September 16, 2016. On September 30, 2016, he was sentenced to a prison term of 30 to 60 years. He was formally convicted as an adult, despite being a juvenile at the time of the offense. During the sentencing hearing, Stewart addressed the court and expressed remorse. He referred to Paul Monchnik as a good man and apologized to the victim's family. His words, however, were received with anger and grief by the Monchnik family. The victim's son described his father's final moments as filled with horror and pain. Following his conviction, George Stewart was transferred into the custody of the Michigan Department of Corrections. Due to his age at the time of the crime, it is unclear whether he was initially held in a juvenile facility before being moved to an adult correctional institution. As of March 2025, George Robert Stewart has served approximately 9 years of his sentence. He remains incarcerated in a Michigan correctional facility. Stewart was 17 at the time of the crime and will be eligible for release no earlier than age 47 and could remain in prison for over 77 years old. Number 13, Johnathan Belton. On December 28, 2008, 16-year-old Johnathan Belton fatally shot Oak Park Public Safety Officer Mason Samborski during a traffic-related interaction in the Rue Versailles apartment complex in Oak Park, Michigan. At the time of the incident, Belton, who did not possess a driver's license, had been pulled over by Officer Samborski for a vehicle violation. The incident began when Officer Samborski noticed a vehicle with a broken taillight and initiated a routine traffic stop. After questioning Belton, who gave a false story about living with his sick mother in a nearby apartment complex, Officer Samborski decided to drive the teen to the Rue Versailles apartments to confirm his identity or contact a responsible adult. This decision led to a fatal encounter. Inside the apartment complex, a confrontation occurred between the officer and Belton. According to witness testimony, including that of a teenage resident of Rue Versailles, she heard a gunshot and then saw Belton standing over the officer holding a gun. Officer Samborski had been shot in the head. He was later pronounced dead. According to the prosecution, Belton had taken Officer Samborski's firearm during the struggle and used it to shoot him. After the shooting, he fled the scene. Investigators testified that he used the officer's cell phone to contact associates, while police and paramedics attempted to save Samborski. The weapon used in the shooting was never recovered. Belton was arrested shortly afterward. Prosecutors charged him with first-degree premeditated murder, murder of a peace officer, and 2 felony firearm offenses. He was 16 at the time of the incident. During the trial, the defense argued that Officer Samborski accidentally shot himself during a physical struggle. The defense presented no witnesses and claimed that prosecutors fabricated evidence and mishandled the investigation. The prosecution argued that the evidence supported a clear case of premeditated murder. They emphasized that Belton took the officer's firearm from its holster and intentionally fired the fatal shot. Frazee highlighted that Belton fled the scene using the officer's phone and made no attempt to assist the dying officer. Jurors deliberated and found Belton guilty on all charges. The verdict was delivered on November 12, 2010. Belton was convicted of first-degree murder and the murder of a peace officer, both carrying mandatory life sentences without the possibility of parole under Michigan law. He was sentenced on December 14, 2010, in Oakland County Circuit Court. He received life in prison without parole. As of March 2025, Johnathan Belton remains incarcerated. He has served 14 years and 5 months in prison as of May 2025. He was 16 years old at the time of the crime. Due to the mandatory life sentence without parole imposed under Michigan law for first-degree murder and murder of a law enforcement officer, he is not scheduled for release. The murder of Officer Samborski left behind his wife and young daughter. His family members expressed relief after the verdict, stating that they believed justice had been served. Number 14, Romaine Williams-Reid. Romaine Williams-Reid was 18 years old when he was charged with the murder of 15-year-old Tashawn Aird in a park near Summerford Grove, Hackney, East London. The incident occurred on the evening of May 1, 2019, during what police described as a confrontation between 2 groups of youths. The same incident also resulted in serious injuries to another 16-year-old boy, who was also brutally attacked while riding a bicycle and later found wounded on Shacklewell Road after seeking shelter in a nearby shop. Prior to the incident, Williams-Reid had not been widely known to police, and little is publicly documented about his early life. He lived in East London and was considered a local youth within Hackney Borough. At the time of the offense, he had recently turned 18. According to investigators from the Metropolitan Police, a conflict between 2 groups of teenagers escalated in a local park near Summerford Grove around 8:45 p.m. Tashawn Aird, an aspiring musician known to his friends for producing Afrobeat and drill music, was among those present. During the confrontation, Tashawn was fatally attacked with a knife, sustaining a wound that punctured his vital organs. Emergency services arrived quickly and attempted life-saving measures, but he was pronounced dead at the scene at 9:49 p.m. Shortly after the attack, police also located a second victim, a 16-year-old male who had also been stabbed and chased from the scene. He had managed to reach a local convenience store for help. He survived his injuries and was treated at the hospital. His wounds were deemed serious but not life-threatening. A forensic post-mortem examination was carried out, which confirmed that Tashawn had died from a single stab wound. Detectives launched a full-scale investigation, reviewing CCTV footage, speaking to witnesses, and gathering physical evidence from the scene and surrounding areas. Romaine Williams-Reid was arrested and formally charged several days later. He was charged with the murder of Tashawn Aird and with grievous bodily harm, with intent in connection to the attack of the second teenager. He appeared at Barkingside Magistrates Court, where initial hearings took place before the case was sent to Crown Court for trial proceedings. He was ultimately convicted of murder and grievous bodily harm with intent. The court imposed a sentence of life imprisonment with a minimum term of 19 years to be served before eligibility for parole. Tashawn Aird's family, who were present, expressed their grief through a written statement read aloud in court. They described Tashawn as a loving and artistic young boy who was passionate about music and drawing, worked hard at school, and had dreams of a career in music. They emphasized the deep void his loss had left in their lives. Following sentencing, Williams-Reid was transferred to a Category A prison facility in the United Kingdom. Due to the nature of his sentence and age at the time of the crime, he was initially placed in a young offender institution before being transitioned to the adult prison system. As of March 2025, Romaine Williams-Reid has served approximately 5 years of his life sentence for the murder of Tashawn Aird and the grievous bodily harm of another youth. He remains incarcerated at HM Prison Belmarsh, a high-security facility in southeast London. He will not be eligible for parole until at least 2038, at which point he will be 37 years old. Number 1. Remy Cordova. On February 20th, 2021, a tragic incident occurred at the intersection of Colfax Avenue and Interstate 25 in Denver, Colorado. Pamela Cabriales, a 32-year-old mother and a real estate agent, was stopped at a red light when she became the victim of a fatal shooting. The events unfolded after a minor traffic collision between Cabriales' vehicle and another car occupied by 14-year-old Remy Cordova and his associate, Neshan Johnson. Perceiving the incident as an issue, Cordova allegedly sought approval from Johnson to retaliate. Johnson reportedly responded, "Do what you gotta do, that's on you." Cordova then exited the vehicle armed with a firearm and approached Cabriales' car. He fired multiple shots into her windshield, critically wounding her. Cabriales was rushed to the hospital, but succumbed to her injuries several days later, leaving behind her young son. The investigation revealed that Cordova and Johnson believed Cabriales had tapped their car from behind at the traffic light. This perceived minor incident escalated into a senseless act of violence. Cordova was apprehended shortly after the shooting, and Johnson was also taken into custody for his involvement. Due to the severity of the crime and Cordova's prior history, he was charged and tried as an adult, despite being 14 at the time of the offense. In November 2024, a jury convicted him of first-degree murder and attempted first-degree murder. The following month, Judge Darrell Shockley sentenced him to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 40 years for the murder charge, and an additional 8 years for the attempted murder charge to be served consecutively. As of March 2025, Cordova has served approximately 4 years of his sentence. Number 2. Nickalas Prosper. On September 13th, 2024, in Luton, England, 19-year-old Nickalas Prosper executed a meticulously planned attack that resulted in the deaths of his mother, Juliana Falcon, his 16-year-old brother, Kyle, and his 13-year-old sister, Giselle. Prosper's ultimate objective was to carry out a mass shooting at his former primary school, aiming to achieve fame as one of history's most notorious mass murderers. Prosper harbored a deep fascination with mass shootings, extensively researching past incidents and formulating a detailed plan to carry out his own. He conducted surveillance of St. Joseph's Catholic Primary School, noting the schedules of assemblies and creating diagrams of classrooms with annotations of his plans for each. His ambition was to surpass the death tolls of previous mass shootings, including those at Sandy Hook and Virginia Tech. To execute his plan, Prosper forged a firearms certificate, enabling him to illegally purchase it from a private seller for £650. He selected Friday the 13th for the attack, a date he believed would add to the infamy of his actions. In the early hours of September 13th, he planned to murder his family while they slept, and then proceed to the school for the mass shooting. However, his mother, Juliana, confronted him after discovering the firearm, leading to a violent altercation. During the struggle, Prosper shot her. Giselle was found hiding under a dining table, having been shot. Kyle was shot twice and sustained over 100 knife wounds. Neighbors, alarmed by the commotion, contacted the police. Prosper fled the scene, hiding the weapon and additional cartridges in nearby bushes. After approximately 2 hours, he approached a police vehicle and was taken into custody. Upon arrest, Prosper displayed a disturbingly cheerful demeanor and inquired about school lockdowns. He pleaded guilty to 3 counts of murder, purchasing a firearm without a certificate, possessing a firearm with intent to endanger life, and carrying a bladed article in public. On March 19, 2025, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 49 years. The judge highlighted Prosper's calculated intentions and his desire for fame. As of March 25, 2025, Nickalas Prosper has been in custody since September 13, 2024, totaling approximately 6 months. Given the minimum term of 49 years, he will be eligible at the age of 68. Number 3. Ethan Crumbley. On November 30, 2021, a tragic event unfolded at Oxford High School in Oxford Township, Michigan. Ethan Crumbley, a 15-year-old sophomore, is accused of opening fire on his fellow students, resulting in the deaths of 4 individuals and injuries to 7 others. At approximately 12:51 p.m. that day, Crumbley allegedly emerged from a bathroom within the school, carrying a semi-automatic firearm. He is said to have begun firing indiscriminately in the hallways, discharging between 15 to 20 shots from multiple magazines. Surveillance footage reportedly captures him moving methodically through the corridors, aiming at students. Law enforcement responded swiftly and apprehended Crumbley within 5 minutes of the initial 911 call. He surrendered without resistance, placing his hands on his head, and was taken into custody. The firearm, purchased by his father on Black Friday just days earlier, was seized at the scene. Subsequent investigations revealed concerning behaviors leading up to the shooting. Crumbley had previously been observed searching for ammunition online during class, prompting school officials to contact his parents. His mother allegedly dismissed the incident, texting him, "LOL, I'm not mad at you. You have to learn not to get caught." Additionally, on the morning of the shooting, a teacher discovered a note on Crumbley's desk depicting violent imagery and pleas for help, leading to a meeting with school counselors and his parents. Despite these warning signs, he was allowed to return to class without a search of his backpack, where the firearm was reportedly concealed. Crumbley was charged as an adult with multiple offenses, including 1 count of hate causing death, 4 counts of first-degree murder, and additional charges related to the shooting. He pleaded guilty to all charges. In September 2023, Judge Kwame Rowe ruled that Crumbley is eligible for life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, citing the premeditated nature of the crime and his continued obsession with violence. As of March 2025, Ethan Crumbley has been serving his life sentence for approximately 1 year and 3 months. Number 4. Aiden Fucci. On May 9, 2021, a tragic event unfolded in St. Johns County, Florida, involving 14-year-old Aiden Fucci and his 13-year-old classmate, Tristan Bailey. Tristan, a cheerleader at Patriot Oaks Academy, was reported missing by her family around 10 a.m. that Sunday. She had last been seen at home around midnight. Surveillance footage revealed that in the early hours of May 9th, Tristan and Aiden were seen walking together near their neighborhood. Approximately 2 hours later, Aiden was captured on camera walking alone, carrying his shoes. Later that evening, Tristan's body was discovered in a wooded area near a retention pond, not far from both their residences. The medical examination revealed she had been brutally used a knife on 114 times, with 49 wounds identified as defensive injuries, indicating she fought desperately to survive during the attack. Aiden Fucci was taken into custody on May 10, 2021. Shockingly, while in the back of a patrol car, he posted a selfie to social media with the caption, "Hey guys, has anybody seen Tristan lately?" displaying a disturbing lack of remorse. Investigators found blood-stained clothing in his possession, and a knife, believed to be the murder weapon, was recovered from a nearby pond. Initially, Fucci pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder charges. However, just before his trial was set to begin in February 2023, he changed his plea to guilty. On March 24, 2023, a judge sentenced him to life in prison, stating that the crime was committed in a cold, calculated manner. Given his age at the time of the offense, Fucci was not eligible for the death penalty. Under Florida law, his sentence will be reviewed after 25 years. As of March 2025, Aiden Fucci has served approximately 2 years of his life sentence. Number 5, Raymond Childs. On January 24, 2021, in Indianapolis, Indiana, 17-year-old Raymond Childs III fatally shot 6 members of his family following a dispute over his curfew. The victims were Raymond Childs Jr., his father, Kezzy Childs, his stepmother, Elijah Childs, his 18-year-old brother, Rita Childs, his 13-year-old little sister, and Kiara Hawkins, his brother Elijah's girlfriend, who was pregnant. Both she and her unborn child, Chaos Hawkins, did not survive. The incident began when Raymond was reprimanded by his father for violating his curfew. An argument started, during which Raymond retrieved firearms from the home and systematically shot his family members. His 15-year-old brother, Xavier, was also shot, but managed to escape and seek help from neighbors. Raymond was arrested and charged with 6 counts of murder. He was sentenced to 360 days in prison. The sentencing took place on March 10, 2025. He just began serving his sentence. Number 6, Aidan Zellmer. On the night of June 7, 2017, a woman named Katie Zellmer called the Thornton Police Department to report that her 15-year-old son, Aidan Zellmer, and 10-year-old Kiaya Campbell had been missing for several hours. According to her, the two had left their home in Thornton, Colorado to go shopping, but never returned, and neither of them had a phone. She drove around searching for them, but found no trace of them. 10-year-old Kiaya was the daughter of Katie's boyfriend, making her Aidan's step-sibling. With 2 minors missing, the police launched a large-scale search operation. During the search, Kiaya's biological father spotted Aidan Zellmer walking alone on Fairfax Street. When questioned, Aidan claimed that he and Kiaya had been caught in a rainstorm while walking back home. He said they got separated, and he tried looking for her in the woods but couldn't find her. Police were immediately suspicious. Aidan's story had inconsistencies, and his movements didn't align with the locations he claimed to have visited. Surveillance footage later revealed that Aidan and Kiaya had been seen walking together at 8:50 p.m. in a back parking lot, but just 40 minutes later, Aidan was seen returning alone. The next evening, a resident discovered Kiaya's partially unclothed body in a greenbelt area about a mile from where Aidan had claimed they got separated. She had suffered severe blunt force trauma. An autopsy revealed that she had suffered blows. At that moment, Aidan Zellmer was still being questioned by police. When they informed him that Kiaya's body had been found, his demeanor changed. He started crying and became visibly agitated. However, when asked directly if he had hurt her, he denied any involvement and insisted that he had only left her behind because she was being annoying. Aidan's shoes and clothing were collected for testing. With so much inconsistency in his story, he was charged and taken to a juvenile center. There he confessed to a cellmate. He was officially sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 40 years. He will be eligible for parole at the age of 57. Number 7, Thomas James Niarhos. On November 22, 2023, in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, 15-year-old Thomas James Niarhos brutally attacked and shot a homeless man, 39-year-old Jeremiah Waylon Hawkins. Around noon, at Security Plaza on South Hanover Street, Niarhos confronted Hawkins. According to authorities, he accused Hawkins of assaulting his 16-year-old girlfriend. When the assault happened, Niarhos reported to police that a homeless man named Jay was responsible for the assault. However, the girl's family chose not to pursue a criminal investigation. On the day of the shooting, surveillance footage and witness statements indicate that Niarhos sought out Hawkins. The two engaged in a heated argument, during which Niarhos brought out a firearm, reportedly belonging to his father, who ironically was the leader of a homeless advocacy group. Hawkins attempted to defend himself by swinging a tire at him, but Niarhos fired a shot, striking Hawkins. After Hawkins fell, Niarhos shot a second time, then he dropped the weapon and began to walk away. Bystanders intervened and detained Niarhos until police arrived. Emergency responders transported Hawkins to Pottstown Hospital, where he was pronounced deceased. Niarhos was taken into custody and charged as an adult with first-degree murder. He was arraigned and held without bail at the Montgomery County Youth Center. As of March 2025, Niarhos has been incarcerated for approximately 1 year and 4 months. Given the gravity of the charges, if convicted, he faces a lengthy prison sentence. Number 8, Russel Burrell. On July 30th, 2012, in Providence, Rhode Island, 17-year-old Russel Burrell, along with his accomplices Quandle Husband and Donovan Hall, conspired to rob Michael Martin, a known street hustler and substance dealer. That evening, the trio approached Martin's apartment under the guise of a social visit. Upon entry, they encountered Michael Martin and Damian Colon. An argument started immediately. Burrell, armed with a Glock firearm, opened fire, fatally shooting both Martin and Colon. The gunfire startled Shamika Barros, who had been napping on the couch. Awakening to the commotion, she began to scream, prompting Burrell to turn, and also used the weapon on her, resulting in her death. During this violent episode, 3 young children were present in the apartment, but fortunately, they were not harmed. After the incident, law enforcement swiftly apprehended the individuals involved. Russel Burrell was charged with 3 counts of murder. In November 2013, Burrell pleaded guilty to these charges, and in December 2014, the Superior Court judge sentenced Burrell to 6 life sentences, plus an additional 10 years. Specifically, 4 of these life sentences were to be served consecutively, with the remaining 2 concurrently, ensuring that Burrell would not be eligible for parole until his mid-90s. As of March 2025, Russel Burrell has served approximately 12 years of his sentence. Given the structure of his consecutive life sentences, he will remain incarcerated for the majority, if not all, of his natural life. Number 9, Samantha Grigg. On February 15, 2014, 19-year-old Michigan State University student Dustin Froka was found unconscious and partially clothed along a road near Lansing, Michigan. He was discovered by a passerby and later pronounced dead at a local hospital. Investigations revealed that Froka had been beaten and robbed by 3 individuals from Saline, Michigan: 18-year-old Samantha Grigg and Tyrell Bretternitz, and 16-year-old Brendan Heim. The trio had conspired to rob Froka, targeting him for his alleged possession of substances and money. On the night of the incident, Grigg drove the group to East Lansing, where they picked up Froka. They proceeded to various ATMs, compelling Froka to withdraw approximately $800. During the drive, Heim, seated in the back with Froka, began assaulting him with brass knuckles. In an attempt to escape, Froka either jumped or fell from the moving SUV, which was traveling between 45 and 60 miles per hour. Afterward, Heim and Bretternitz exited the vehicle to retrieve Frolka's money and clothing before fleeing the scene. Following their arrests, the individuals faced various charges. Samantha Grigg, initially charged with first-degree murder and armed robbery, accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to manslaughter and unarmed robbery. She was sentenced to 6 to 15 years in prison and agreed to testify against her co-defendants. As of March 2025, Samantha Grigg has served approximately 11 years of her sentence. Number 10, Dexter Johnson. On June 18, 2006, in Houston, Texas, 18-year-old Dexter Johnson, along with accomplices Keithran Fields, Timothy Randall, and Ashley Irvin, embarked on a violent crime spree that resulted in the tragic deaths of 23-year-old Maria Apares and her 17-year-old boyfriend, Huingo. That evening, Maria and her boyfriend were conversing in his car outside his residence. Johnson and his accomplices approached the vehicle. They brought out and displayed their weapons. Then they forced the couple into the back seat and took off with the car, driving them around Houston while demanding money, credit cards, and ATM access numbers. After obtaining approximately $25 in cash and a credit card, they drove to a secluded wooded area. There, Johnson assaulted Maria in the back seat of the car, while her boyfriend was forced to listen, kneeling outside as the other accomplices taunted him. Afterwards, they marched the lovers 60 feet into the woods there. Johnson shot no, and Maria screamed and covered her face, at which point Johnson shot her also. The bodies remained undiscovered for 5 days until investigators, aided by information from one of the accomplices, located them. The group was implicated in another set of crimes they committed in a separate case. Johnson was arrested and charged with capital murder. The jury deliberated for 2 hours before convicting him. He was sentenced to death. As of March 2025, Johnson has served approximately 18 years on death row. His execution has been postponed multiple times. His current status remains pending further judicial review. Number 11, Konrad Schafer. In July 2013, Osceola County, Florida, 15-year-old Konrad Schafer, accompanied by associates Juan Muriel, Victoria Rios, and David Damas, went on a crime spree that resulted in the tragic deaths of 2 individuals. The spree began when teens began shooting randomly, targeting over 20 homes and vehicles, causing property damage, but no injuries. However, the violence escalated days later when 17-year-old David Guerrero was fatally shot while walking to work. Days later, the group invaded the home of 22-year-old Eric Rupnarine. The group pretended to just visit the victim. When they were let in, they robbed and brutally murdered the victim. After the incident, law enforcement swiftly apprehended the group. Schafer, despite his age, was charged as an adult due to the severity of his crimes. He faced multiple charges, including first-degree murder. Schafer pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His accomplices received different sentences. As of March 2025, Konrad Schafer has served approximately 12 years of his life sentence without the possibility of parole. For number 12, Dylan Shoemaker. On March 19, 2013, in Springville, New York, 16-year-old Dylan Shoemaker was entrusted with the care of his girlfriend Ashley Smith's 2 young sons, 23-month-old Austin Smith and his 3-month-old brother. While Ashley worked a night shift at a local restaurant, Shoemaker was responsible for babysitting the children. During the evening, Austin became distressed and began crying. Shoemaker, in an attempt to silence the toddler, placed a material over him and struck it multiple times. He later admitted to slapping Austin and forcefully slamming him onto the floor during a diaper change when he tried to get up. These actions resulted in severe head injuries, which ultimately led to Austin's death. Throughout this period, Shoemaker was engaged in numerous text message exchanges. He attempted to arrange a meeting with another individual and discussed selling substances to friends. Despite Austin's injuries, Shoemaker did not seek medical assistance, choosing instead to continue his personal conversations. Upon Ashley's return from work, she discovered her son unresponsive, leading to emergency services being called. Austin was pronounced dead due to the injuries. During the trial, Shoemaker expressed remorse, stating, "I never wanted to hurt Austin. I never wanted Austin to die." However, evidence presented, including a recorded phone conversation with his mother where Shoemaker remarked, "I'm a 16-year-old blonde. Probably all I have to do is cry, and they're going to feel sorry for me," led the court to view him as manipulative. The presiding judge sentenced Shoemaker to 25 years to life in prison, emphasizing that at 16, he knew right from wrong, and that his actions were a betrayal of the child's trust. In 2016, Shoemaker's sentence was reduced to 18 years to life. As of March 2025, he remains incarcerated at the Clinton Correctional Facility in New York, having served approximately 12 years of his sentence. Number 13, John Paul Freeman Jr. On August 26, 2012, in Niagara Falls, New York, 16-year-old John Freeman Jr. was taking care of 5-year-old Isabella Tennant at her great-grandparents' home. Freeman, a trusted family friend and neighbor, had been left to watch over Isabella while her great-grandparents retired for the evening, and her mother was at work. During this time, Freeman fatally strangled Isabella, resulting in her death. He then sought the assistance of his friend, 18-year-old Tyler Best, to conceal the crime. Together, they tried to dispose of Isabella's body and kept it hidden so no one could find it. The following morning, Isabella was reported missing, prompting a search by family members and law enforcement. Tyler, experiencing remorse, approached the police and disclosed the location of Isabella's body, leading to the swift arrest of both Freeman and Tyler. Freeman was charged with second-degree murder and tampering with physical evidence. During the sentencing, he was given an opportunity to make a statement. He then turned slightly to look at the victim's family members and said, "I'm so sorry for all their family. I'm just sorry. I can't say anything else." He couldn't explain why he committed this heinous crime. He pleaded guilty to both charges and, on September 5, 2013, was sentenced to 22 years to life in prison. This sentence requires Freeman to serve a minimum of 22 years before he may be eligible for parole. As of March 2025, Freeman has served approximately 12 years of his sentence. He may be eligible for parole in 2034. This tragic incident deeply affected the victim's family, especially the grandmother of the victim, as she trusted Freeman and saw him as a harmless teenager. 14. Logan Tyler Mott. In November 2017, 15-year-old Logan Tyler Mott was living with his grandmother, 53-year-old Christina French, in Neptune Beach, Florida, while his father was away on vacation. During this period, Mott shot and brutally murdered his grandmother. He then attempted to conceal the crime by burying her body in a shallow grave in the backyard of their residence. After the incident, Mott took his grandmother's 2015 Dodge Dart and several firearms from the house and fled. He was reported missing, along with French, when they failed to pick up his father and his father's girlfriend from the airport upon their return. The Neptune Beach home was found ransacked, with the door open and firearms missing from their safe. Days later, Mott was apprehended near the Canadian border in Buffalo, New York, after making a wrong turn onto the Peace Bridge. He was driving his grandmother's car and was found in possession of 3 firearms, including 2 service weapons belonging to his father and a bloody knife. He was arrested and he pleaded guilty to second-degree murder as part of a negotiated plea agreement. Judge Bruce Anderson sentenced him to 15 years in state custody, followed by 10 years of probation. Mott received credit for 740 days already served. He was to serve the initial portion of his sentence in a juvenile facility until he turned 21, after which he would be transferred to an adult prison to complete the remainder of his sentence. As of March 2025, Mott has served approximately 7.5 years in prison. Number 15, Antonio Barbeau. On September 17, 2012, in Sheboygan Falls, Wisconsin, 13-year-old Antonio Barbeau and his friend, Nathan Pape, also 13, formulated a plan to rob Barbeau's 78-year-old great-grandmother, Barbara Olson. Their intent was to obtain money and valuables to support their desire for financial gain. The boys armed themselves, Barbeau with a hatchet and Pop with a hammer, and proceeded to Olson's residence. Upon arrival, Olson discovered them in her garage and, recognizing her great-grandson, invited them inside. Once inside, as Olson turned her back to call Barbeau's mother, Barbeau struck her on the head with the hatchet. Overwhelmed by the act, Barbeau momentarily retreated to the bathroom. During his absence, Pop struck Olson multiple times with the hammer. Upon returning, Barbeau resumed the assault, delivering additional blows with the hatchet. After ensuring that his great-grandmother was deceased, the boys attempted to conceal her body by dragging it to the garage and covering it with a blanket. They then stole jewelry and approximately $150 in cash. In an effort to mislead investigators, they drove Olson's vehicle to a local bowling alley, left the stolen items inside, and abandoned the car, hoping someone else would be implicated in the crime. The following day, Olson's body was discovered by concerned family members. Investigation led authorities to Barbeau and Pop, who were arrested and charged with first-degree intentional homicide. Barbeau pleaded no contest to the charges and, on August 12, 2013, was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 37 years. He may be considered for parole eligibility on November 24, 2048, his 50th birthday. As of March 2025, Barbeau has served approximately 12 years of his sentence. His accomplice Pape also received a similar sentence. Number 16. T.J. Lane. On February 27, 2012, at around 7:30 a.m., 17-year-old Thomas Lane entered the cafeteria of Chardon High School in Chardon, Ohio. Wearing a sweatshirt with the word "Killer" handwritten across the front, he carried a firearm. Without warning, Lane opened fire on a group of students seated at a table, striking several individuals. The victims were 16-year-old Daniel Parmertor, who died of his injuries shortly after the shooting, 17-year-old Russell King Jr., who died at the hospital, and 16-year-old Demetrius Hewlin, who passed away a day after. 3 other students were wounded, including Nick Walsack, who suffered injuries resulting in permanent paralysis. Lane fled the scene, but was apprehended by authorities near his parked car shortly after the incident. During his sentencing on March 19, 2013, Lane displayed a lack of remorse. He removed his dress shirt to reveal the same "Killer" t-shirt worn during the shooting and made obscene gestures toward the victims' families. The judge sentenced Lane to 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. On September 11, 2014, Lane, along with 2 older inmates, escaped from prison. He was captured the following day, and the 3 men were transferred to a maximum security prison. As of March 2025, Lane has served approximately 13 years of his sentence. He remains incarcerated with no possibility of release. Number 17. Gavon Ramsey. In April 2018, the community of Wadsworth, Ohio, was shaken by a grievous crime committed by 17-year-old Gavon Ramsey. On the day of the incident, Ramsey entered his 98-year-old neighbor, Margaret Douglas, home through an unlocked door, a common practice in their trusting neighborhood. Once inside, he strangled Margaret, concealed her body in a closet, and covered her with clothing. Days later, her family reported her missing. Later that day, they all discovered her body, where Ramsey had hidden it. Investigators identified Ramsey as a suspect during an investigation in an unrelated local crime. A search of his home revealed Margaret's stolen wallet, photographs of her sleeping stored on his phone, and a journal detailing fantasies about strangulation. Ramsey was convicted and was charged as an adult. He pleaded no contest to the charges, leading to a guilty verdict. In November 2018, he was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As of March 2025, Ramsey has served approximately 7 years of his life sentence. Number 18. Lacy Aaron Schmidt. On January 31, 2011, in Harlem, Georgia, 14-year-old Lacy Aaron Schmidt fatally shot his neighbor and former girlfriend, 14-year-old Alana Callahan, in her home. Schmidt had stolen a hand weapon from Alana's father's bedroom prior to the incident. He entered the Callahan residence while Alana was at her computer and shot her in the back of the head. Schmidt then attempted to conceal the crime by dragging Alana's body into the nearby woods and initially claimed that an intruder had abducted her. Upon investigation, authorities found inconsistencies in Schmidt's accounts and discovered items belonging to the Callahan family in his possession. During the investigation, Alana's mother explained that her daughter and Aaron had dated previously, but their church pastor advised Alana not to continue with the relationship, as she wasn't of age yet for such a relationship. Alana listened and told Aaron that they can only become friends. This could also be the reason why Aaron committed the heinous act. He was arrested and charged with malice murder, possession of a firearm during the commission of a crime, and theft by taking a hand weapon. In February 2012, Schmidt was convicted on all charges and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As of March 2025, Schmidt has served approximately 14 years of his life sentence without parole. Number 19, Shondell Jackson. On July 6, 2009, in Milwaukee's River West neighborhood, 21-year-old University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee film student Nathan Potter was walking near his apartment when he was approached by 19-year-old Shondell Jackson and 20-year-old Derek Thomas. The pair intended to rob Potter. However, upon discovering he had no money, Jackson fatally shot him once, which resulted in his death. Following the incident, Jackson fled Wisconsin and was apprehended in Gulfport, Mississippi, on September 14, 2009. During his trial, Jackson displayed a lack of remorse, at one point smiling at the victim's family. Thomas, his accomplice, also said that Jackson shot Potter just because he didn't have any money on him. He was convicted of first-degree intentional homicide and attempted robbery. In April 2010, Judge Rebecca Dallett sentenced Jackson to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The victim's mother expressed gratitude to the judge for the sentencing. As of March 2025, Jackson has served approximately 15 years of his life sentence. Number 20, Chalin Funes. On the evening of May 27, 2017, in Visalia, California, 18-year-old Chalin Funes brutally attacked 35-year-old Eric Fisher. The tragic incident happened when Eric Fisher attempted to intervene and break up a fight between Funes's boyfriend and another man who was walking his dog. During the confrontation, Funes, who was behind the wheel of her vehicle, drove and struck Fisher. During the investigation, eyewitnesses, including Fisher's wife, who was present at the scene of the crime with their 8-year-old child, gave police the full account of the incident. She told the police that Funes not only hit Fisher, her husband, once, but she also reversed over him and subsequently dragged him down the street. She said she pleaded non-stop for her to stop, but Funes continued and later fled the scene, and her child also witnessed the horrific hit and run. Fisher sustained severe injuries from the incident and was rushed to the hospital. Despite the medical team's efforts, Fisher died to his injuries later that night. The police, through the help of public tips, quickly identified Funes as the suspect. They located the vehicle she was driving during the incident. Funes was apprehended shortly thereafter. During the trial, the prosecution presented evidence detailing the severity of Fisher's injuries and death. The defense argued that Funes did not intend to kill Fisher. However, the jury found Funes guilty of second-degree murder, with the special allegation of using a deadly weapon, her car. She was sentenced to 16 years to life imprisonment. As of March 2025, she has been in prison for approximately 7 years. Number 21, Colton Glenn Orr. In the early hours of August 22, 2016, in Vinita, Oklahoma, 14-year-old Coalton Glenn Orr attacked and shot his father's fiancée, 38-year-old Laura Beth Hendricks, in their shared residence. The assault led to Beth's untimely death, After the incident, Glenn went to the police department and told them he needed a hug, and afterwards he told them that he just shot and killed his father's wife-to-be. He initially claimed that Beth abused him, but evidence proved that she never did. Following the incident, Glenn was arrested and charged as an adult due to the severity of the offense. In court proceedings, he entered a guilty plea to the charge of first-degree murder. The presiding judge sentenced him to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole, stipulating that all but the first 25 years of the sentence were suspended. This means that he is required to serve a minimum of 25 years before he may be considered eligible for parole. He will be 40 years by this time. Glenn's father broke down in tears in the courtroom as he gave his victim impact speech. Glenn also turned around and apologized to the victim's family, showing remorse. As of March 2025, Orr has served approximately 8 years of his sentence. Number 22, Philip Chisholm. On October 22, 2013, 14-year-old Philip Chisholm, a freshman at Danvers High School in Massachusetts, committed a heinous crime against his 24-year-old math teacher, Colleen Ritzer. After school hours, Ritzer had asked Chisholm to stay for extra help. During this session, Chisholm followed Ritzer into a restroom where he brutally assaulted her. After assaulting her, he brutally murdered her. To conceal his actions, Chisholm placed Ritzer's body in a certain container and transported it to a wooded area near the school, where he further assaulted her again and stole her credit card and other belongings. The crime was discovered when Ritzer was reported missing after failing to return home. Surveillance footage from the school shows all the activities and evidence of the crime, leading to Chisholm's arrest. During the trial, he showed no remorse for his actions, and he sat motionless. His lawyers argued that he suffered mental issues and needed a psychiatrist, but the judge boldly rejected their claims. The prosecution maintained that Chisholm knew what he was doing. In the end, he was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 40 years. In 2024, Chisholm also pleaded guilty to a similar crime he committed against another woman earlier before attacking his teacher. He received additional 17 to 20 years to his sentence. Number 23, Dakota Lamar White. In the early hours of October 15, 2016, in Perry, Georgia, 18-year-old Samuel Poss received a message from his former classmate, 17-year-old Dakota Lamar White. White requested Sam's assistance with computer game coding, knowing Sam was knowledgeable in computers. Trusting his friend, Sam agreed to help and left his home to meet White. Unknowingly to Sam, White and another accomplice, 18-year-old Brandon Warren, had a deadly ulterior motive. Before carrying it out, they decided to experience what it felt like to kill. They chose Sam because of his helpful nature and the likelihood that he would come if called upon. Upon Sam's arrival at White's grandparents' home, he was ambushed. White strangled Sam, while Warren stabbed him multiple times. After ensuring Sam was dead, they transported his body to a wooded area in Houston County, commonly used for dumping trash, and left him there. When Sam failed to return home, his family reported him missing. A search ensued, and 2 days later, Sam's body was discovered in the woods. An autopsy confirmed that he had been strangled and stabbed multiple times. Investigators quickly identified White and Warren as suspects. White confessed to the crime and led authorities to the murder weapons. Both were arrested and charged. In May 2018, both White and Warren were found guilty on all charges. Despite White's age at the time of the crime, the court deemed him irreparably corrupt and sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Warren received the same sentence. Samuel's father was very devastated by the death of his son, stating, "I think the betrayal is the hardest part, and knowing that someone used his own goodness against him. I mean, that's what pure evil looks like." As of March 2025, Dakota White has served approximately 8.5 years of his life sentence without the possibility of parole. Number 24, Racelyn Martin. On August 8, 2016, in Fayetteville, North Carolina, 17-year-old Raistlin Martin brutally murdered his 63-year-old grandfather, Joseph Emmett Nolte. On the night of the incident, Nolte's son, Joseph Ezekiel Nolte, was alerted by his father's cries and discovered him severely injured and dead in his bed, having sustained over 31 hatchet wounds. Martin, who committed the act covered in blood, was found nearby with the murder weapon. Investigations revealed that Martin had expressed intentions to harm his grandfather prior to the incident. Authorities recovered 107 pages of deleted text messages from Martin's iPhone, where he referred to his grandfather as kinda inconvenient and expressed a desire for his death. Initially, Martin contemplated poisoning, but later decided on using a different method. The grandfather had moved in with them after his wife passed away. He was described by his son as an inconsiderate man. After the incident, Martins was charged and he pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 25 years. As of March 2025, Martin has served approximately 9 years of his sentence. Number 25, Shane Thompson. On September 18, 2013, 17-year-old Shane Thompson and his accomplices forcibly entered a family's home on the east side of Indianapolis, near 21st Street and Post Road. Inside, they subjected the family to a harrowing ordeal, confining them at gunpoint. The mother was assaulted in the presence of her husband and 3 children after the incident. They fled. A week later, the trio targeted a gas station on West 38th Street and High School Road. During the robbery, Thompson shot and killed 45-year-old Evelad Ndiaye, a clerk who had been employed at the station for only 2 days. After the incident, they were arrested and charged. The court sentenced Thompson to 110 years in prison. As of March 2025, Shane Thompson has just served approximately 11 years of his 110-year sentence. Number 26, David Meyers. In March 2014, a tragic incident unfolded in Buffalo, New York, involving 19-year-old David Meyers and 52-year-old Brian Dombeck. Meyers and Dombeck were close acquaintances, though the exact nature of their relationship remains undisclosed. On the day of the crime, Meyers entered Dombeck's residence on Sirit Street. Inside, he fatally assaulted Dombeck using blunt force. To conceal the crime, Meyers then set fire to the house, resulting in the death of Dombeck's dog as well. Following his arrest, Meyers was charged with second-degree murder and arson. In October 2014, he pleaded guilty to these charges. By December 2014, he was sentenced to a prison term ranging from 15 years to life. As of March 2025, David Meyers has served approximately 10 years and 3 months of his sentence. He may be eligible for parole soon. However, the decision to grant parole will depend on various factors assessed by the parole board at that time. Number 27, Timothy Mosley. On January 28, 2014, 19-year-old Timothy Mosley and his friend Austin Meyers devised a plan to rob and murder Justin Back, aiming to steal valuables from his home. On the day of the crime, under the pretense of wanting to hang out, they visited Back's residence. Once inside, Meyers distracted Back while Mosley attempted to strangle him. The attempt failed, leading to a struggle. During the altercation, Mosley resorted to using a pocket knife. He used the knife on Back for over 21 times. During this brutal attack, Back pleaded for his life, but his assailants did not listen. After the murder, Mosley and Meyers meticulously cleaned the crime scene to eliminate evidence. They wrapped Back's body in a blanket and transported it to a remote wooded area in Preble County and abandoned it. The disappearance of Justin Back quickly drew the attention of local law enforcement. Investigations led authorities to Mosley and Meyers, whose stories were inconsistent and suspicious. Confronted with evidence, Mosley confessed to the crime. Timothy Mosley accepted a plea deal to avoid the death penalty and testified against his friend. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, and his friend received a death sentence. He expressed remorse during his sentencing. As of March 2025, Timothy Mosley has served approximately 11 years of his life sentence. Number 28, Brian Lee Draper. On September 22, 2006, 16-year-old Cassie Jo Stoddart was house-sitting for her aunt and uncle in the nearby community of Tyhee. That evening, her boyfriend, Matt Beckham, joined her. Later, 16-year-old Draper and his 16-year-old friend, Tori Michael Adamczyk, visited the house under the guise of hanging out. Unknowingly to Cassie and Matt, Draper had unlocked the basement door before leaving, intending to return later. After leaving, Draper and Adamczyk returned, wearing dark clothing, gloves, and white masks. They re-entered the house through the unlocked basement door. To instill fear, they disrupted the power by accessing the circuit breaker, hoping to lure Cassie and Matt downstairs. When this tactic failed, they restored some lights. Matt left around 10:30 p.m., leaving Cassie alone. The intruders cut the power again and waited. When Cassie didn't come downstairs, they ascended to the living room, where they attacked her and used the knife on her approximately 30 times. After 2 days, Cassie's aunt and uncle returned home and discovered her lifeless body on the floor. Police was contacted, and during the investigation, Draper and Adamczyk provided inconsistent alibis, claiming to have attended a movie, but theater staff confirmed they hadn't attended. Draper then confessed and took the police to where they had hidden the murder weapons. The police also recovered a videotape that revealed Draper and Adamczyk discussing their plan to murder Cassie, expressing excitement and detailing their intentions. In one recording, Draper stated, "We found our victim, and sad as it may be, she's our friend. But you know what? We all have to make sacrifices." Both were charged and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole and an additional 30 years. Number 29, Aidan Von Grabo. In November 2017, Longmont, Colorado, 15-year-old Aidan Von Grabo compiled a list he referred to as a death list, which included names of individuals he intended to harm. His list detailed methods of intended harm, indicating premeditation. On the day of the tragic incident, he went into the residence of 20-year-old Michaela Grote, reportedly intending to harm her younger sister, with whom he attended high school with. When Michaela answered the door, Von Grabo attacked her and inflicted fatal stab wounds. Her sister managed to escape and provided authorities with Von Grabo's identity. Prior to this incident, Von Grabo's mother had contacted authorities, expressing concerns about his behavior. She reported that he had damaged property and threatened her with a knife. Additionally, she informed investigators about his possession of various weapons. Von was apprehended and charged as an adult. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 40 years. He will be 57 years old when he may be considered for parole. Number 30, Louis Daines. In February 2014, 19-year-old Louis Daines committed the murder of 14-year-old Breck Bednar in Grays, Essex, England. Daines had initially connected with Breck through online gaming communities in 2013. He gradually established a manipulative and controlling relationship over several months. He promised Breck opportunities for wealth through a fictitious computer business and provided him with a mobile phone to facilitate their communication. Despite concerns from Breck's family and friends about Daines' influence, Breck traveled to Daines' flat on February 16, 2014. The following morning, Daines contacted emergency services, claiming that an altercation had occurred between them, resulting in Breck's death. Upon arrival, authorities discovered that Breck had been stabbed, with his wrists and ankles bound by duct tape. Daines had also submerged electronic devices in water in an apparent attempt to destroy evidence. In January 2015, Daines pleaded guilty to murder and was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 25 years. As of March 25, 2025, he has served approximately 11 years of his sentence. Number 31, Deontay James Green. In October 2017, Tulsa, Oklahoma, experienced a series of violent crimes committed by 16-year-old Deontay Green. On October 1st, Green approached an 81-year-old woman and her husband outside their home. He forced them inside at gunpoint, compelled them to drive to a bank to withdraw cash, and upon returning to their residence, he assaulted the woman. Afterwards, he threatened them, making them not to call the police. Later that day, Green encountered the Anderson family outside their home. He forced them inside, unaware that Shane Anderson, a 44-year-old middle school teacher, was present. A confrontation started between Green and Shane, during which Green fatally shot Shane in front of his wife and children. These incidents were part of a broader crime spree by Green, which included multiple armed robberies, home invasions, and assaults. He was arrested shortly after these events. In March 2019, Green pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, assault, and 19 other felonies. In July 2019, he was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for the murder, plus an additional 290 years for the other offenses, some of which are to be served concurrently. As of March 25, 2025, Deontay Green has served approximately 5 years and 8 months of his life sentence. Number 32, Spencer Brian Lewis. On February 12, 2017, in West Allis, Wisconsin, 14-year-old Spencer Brian Lewis and a 13-year-old accomplice devised a plan to rob 17-year-old Trajan Edwards, believing he possessed some substance and cash. Lewis armed himself with his father's Glock firearm, while his accomplice carried a hammer. Under the pretense of playing video games, the pair visited the Edwards residence. Once inside, Lewis brought out the firearm, pointing it at Trajan's head. A struggle ensued, during which Lewis shot Trajan multiple times. Hearing the commotion, Trajan's 19-year-old brother, Corcian Edwards, intervened. Lewis then turned to Corcian and shot him multiple times. Corcian died at the scene, while Trajan succumbed to his injuries 2 days later in the hospital. Following his arrest, Lewis indicated that he needed money for some expensive clothing, and that's why he tried to rob them. Lewis was charged as an adult with 2 counts of first-degree reckless homicide and 1 count of attempted armed robbery. The victim's mother cried all through the court hearing and shared how she didn't expect that Spencer, who consistently visited their home and slept most of the time, could do such a painful act against her. Spencer pleaded guilty to amended charges of second-degree reckless homicide and attempted armed robbery. In April 2018, at the age of 15, Lewis was sentenced to 37 years in prison. As of March 2025, he has served 7 years of his sentence. Number 33, Taylor Lane Gwaltney. In the early hours of February 5, 2009, in Colorado Springs, Colorado, 55-year-old David Doyle, a homeless man, was sleeping on a pedestrian bridge over Interstate 25. At approximately 2:30 a.m., 18-year-old Taylor Lane Gwaltney approached Doyle and, without provocation, attacked him with a baseball bat, inflicting fatal head injuries. After the incident, Gwaltney reportedly started bragging about his actions. He told over 15 teenagers about what he did, referring to Doyle in derogatory terms and expressing pride in his actions. This behavior led to increased scrutiny from law enforcement. 10 days later, an arrest warrant was issued for Gwaltney. He was apprehended after a brief foot chase near Motor City Drive in Colorado Springs. During the trial, witnesses testified about Gwaltney's admissions and lack of remorse. The jury deliberated for 2 hours before finding him guilty of first-degree murder. On May 11, 2010, Gwaltney received a mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole. As of March 2025, Gwaltney has served approximately 15 years of his life sentence. Michael and Robert Bever. In the late hours of July 22, 2015, in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, 16-year-old Michael Bever and his 18-year-old brother, Robert Bever, executed a meticulously planned heinous attack on their family. The brothers wanted to be known as serial killers, with aspirations to continue their killing spree beyond their household. The tragic event began when the brothers lured their 13-year-old sister into a room under the pretense of showing her something on the computer. Robert attempted to slit her throat, but she managed to escape, alerting her younger siblings to hide. Michael chased her, subdued her, and inflicted severe injuries. Though she survived, the brothers then attacked and murdered their parents. Their 44-year-old mother, April Bever, suffered over 48 stab wounds, and their 52-year-old father, David Bever, also suffered over 28 wounds. They proceeded to lure their younger siblings out of hiding and brutally murdered them. 12-year-old Daniel, 7-year-old Christopher, and 5-year-old Victoria. Their 2-year-old sister was unharmed, reportedly because they decided to overlook her. The police were contacted when 12-year-old Daniel, just before he was murdered, fearfully dialed 911, reporting that his brothers were attacking their family. He couldn't give out the address as the line went dead during the call. Upon arrival, police found the 13-year-old sister injured outside the home and discovered the bodies inside. The brothers were apprehended shortly after, hiding in a wooded area near their home, covered in dirt and blood. In 2016, Robert Bever pleaded guilty to all charges and received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Michael Bever's trial concluded in May 2018, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment. As of March 2025, Michael Bever and his brother have served approximately 9.5 years of his sentence. Joseph B. Spencer. On September 3, 2012, in Doddridge County, West Virginia, 16-year-old Joseph B. Spencer fatally shot his father, 49-year-old Frederick Arthur Spencer, his mother, 47-year-old Dixie Lee Spencer, and his 9-year-old sister, Patience Spencer, at their family home near West Union, with his father's firearm. His father was a seasoned pilot for UPS, and his mother was a respected science teacher at Ritchie County Middle School, and young Patience was a student at Doddridge County Elementary School. After the incident, Joseph himself contacted the authorities to report the shootings. He was taken into custody and initially held at a juvenile detention center in Parkersburg. Given the severity of the crime, the case was transferred to adult court. In January 2014, Joseph Spencer pleaded guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder. The plea agreement included a recommendation for mercy, allowing for the possibility of parole. Judge Tim Sweeney sentenced Joseph to 3 life terms in prison. 2 of these terms were ordered to run consecutively, and the 3rd concurrently, making Joseph eligible for parole after serving 30 years. As of March 2025, Joseph Spencer has served approximately 13 years of his sentence. He will be eligible for parole in 2042, after completing the mandatory 30-year period. These 16 teenagers are set to spend long years in a high-security prison. Number 1, 18-year-old Riley Tolliver. On the evening of January 27, 2024, in the Knoll West area of Bristol, 4 teenagers, 18-year-old Riley Tolliver, 17-year-old Cody Shea Westcott, and 2 boys aged 15 and 16 carried out a violent attack that led to the deaths of 15-year-old Mason Rist and 16-year-old Max Dixon. The crime was a fatal case of mistaken identity. Mason and Max had been best friends since nursery and were walking together to get a pizza when the attack happened. Earlier that evening, a property in the Hartcliffe area connected to one of the teenage attackers had been targeted by masked youths, throwing bricks and injuring a woman. Believing the incident to be part of a rivalry between local neighborhoods, the attackers set out to retaliate. The 4 teenagers were driven around in a vehicle by 45-year-old Anthony Snook, who acted as the getaway driver. While in Knoll West, the group spotted Mason and Max and wrongly assumed the boys were involved in the earlier brick attack. Tolliver was armed with a baseball bat, while the other 3 teenagers carried machetes. At approximately 11:20 p.m., the attackers jumped out of the car and chased the boys down. The entire assault lasted just 33 seconds. Both Mason and Max were brutally used a knife on multiple times. CCTV from Mason's house and surrounding areas captured the lead-up and the attack itself, which was later used in court. Emergency services were called, and both boys were taken to the hospital. Despite the efforts of medical staff, Mason and Max died in the early hours of January 28, 2024, due to the severity of their stab wounds. The teenagers fled the scene shortly after the assault. 6 hours later, one of the attackers was seen picking up a McDonald's meal. The investigation quickly identified and arrested the suspects. CCTV footage, forensic evidence, and witness statements played a significant role in piecing together the events. The 4 teenagers and the adult driver were charged with 2 counts of murder. During the trial at Bristol Crown Court, the prosecution emphasized the mistaken identity and the lack of justification for the attack. The defense acknowledged the involvement of the youths, but contested the intent. The jury, after reviewing the evidence, found all 5 guilty of murder. Chloe Rist, Mason's sister, delivered an emotional victim impact statement during the sentencing. Holding up a small pouch containing Mason's ashes and a lock of his blood-stained hair, she addressed the 4 teenagers. She also explained that Mason had been diagnosed with autism at the age of 3, describing him as vulnerable and harmless. On December 19, 2024, Riley Tolliver was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 23 years and 47 days. Cody Shy Westcott was sentenced to life with a minimum of 23 years and 44 days. The 16-year-old boy received life with a minimum of 18 years, and the 15-year-old was sentenced to life with a minimum of 15 years. Anthony Snook, the driver, was sentenced to life with a minimum of 38 years. As of May 2025, all 4 teenagers remain in prison. Riley Tolliver has served 1 year and 4 months and will be eligible for release at age 41. Cody Shy Westcott has served the same and will be eligible for release at approximately age 40. The unnamed 16-year-old release at age 34, and the 15-year-old at age 30. Number 2, 18-year-old Daniel Hussein. On June 5, 2020, 18-year-old Daniel Hussein murdered 2 sisters, 46-year-old Biba Henry and 27-year-old Nicole Smallman, in Friant Country Park in Wembley, northwest London. Biba Henry, who was a social worker, and Nicole Smallman, who was a freelance photographer, were in the park celebrating Biba's birthday. After a joyful evening with friends, the sisters remained at the park alone, continuing their celebration into the early hours. Around this time, Hussein arrived at the park armed with a knife and driven by a delusional belief rooted in occult practices. Hussein had drafted a handwritten contract using his own blood in which he pledged to sacrifice women in return for winning the Mega Millions Super Jackpot lottery. The pact, addressed to a demon he referred to as Mighty King Lucifuge Rophakal, committed him to performing a minimum of 6 sacrifices every 6 months for as long as he was free and physically capable. At approximately 4:19 a.m., Hussein attacked the sisters. He used the knife on Biba Henry 8 times and Nicole Smallman 28 times. After the murder, he dragged their bodies into a wooded area of the park, leaving them concealed and intertwined. Nicole's boyfriend found their bodies the following day after they failed to return home. He had used location data from a mobile phone to trace their steps, eventually discovering the scene himself before contacting emergency services. Forensic investigators quickly recovered a blood-stained knife near the bodies. DNA evidence linked the knife and the victims' bodies to Hussein. Surveillance footage also captured him purchasing knives and returning home after the attack with injuries. He later sought hospital treatment, claiming to have been mugged. Investigators believe a severe injury to his hand during the murders prevented him from continuing his intended killing spree. Hussein was arrested on July 1, 2020, at his mother's home in Blackheath, southeast London. During the search of his bedroom, police found multiple handwritten demonic pacts, including one committing him to murder women in exchange for lottery success and protection from detection. Devices seized from his room, including an iPad, revealed some internet activity involving occult forums and dark web content, but police were unable to access his full browsing history due to encryption and international legal barriers. Hussein had previously been referred to the UK's Prevent Counter-Terrorism program in 2017, at age 15 after concerns at his school. He was later assessed under the Channel program and discharged in 2018 with no active concerns of extremism. At the time of the murders, he was living with his mother and attending Orpington College. The trial took place at the Old Bailey, where he refused to testify in his own defense and denied involvement throughout proceedings. He was found guilty of 2 counts of murder and possession of a bladed article. The court heard that Hussein displayed no remorse and continued to claim innocence despite overwhelming forensic and surveillance evidence. The mother of the victims, the Venerable Mina Smallman, the Church of England's first black female archdeacon, delivered a statement describing the murder as incomprehensible. She stated that no one expects their children to die before them, but to have 2 of your 3 children murdered overnight is just incomprehensible. She added that if any good comes out of this, at least another 4 women will not meet a similar end in a so-called pact with a so-called demon. The detective inspector described Hussein as a dangerous, arrogant, and violent individual who from the outset has shown no remorse or acceptance of his actions. On October 28, 2021, Daniel Hussein was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 35 years. As of May 2025, he has served approximately 3 years and 10 months in prison. He was 18 at the time of the crime and will be eligible for release no earlier than the year 2056, by which time he will be 54 years old. Number 3, 16-year-old Cartel Bushnell. On the evening of June 10, 2023, in the Weston area of Bath, Somerset, 16-year-old Cartel Bushnell was involved in a fatal attack that led to the death of another 16-year-old boy, Mikey Roynan. The attack took place during a girl's 16th birthday party. Alongside Bushnell were 2 other 16-year-olds, Shane Cunningham and Leo Knight. All 3 teenagers had traveled together from Wiltshire to the party. CCTV footage later confirmed that the boys brought knives with them to the event. Leo Knight was seen on the bus with a knife tucked into his trousers, which was visible when he bent down. The gathering was meant to be a celebration, but tensions quickly escalated. According to police and court proceedings, an argument broke out in the garden of the host's property. During the confrontation, Shane Cunningham brutally attacked Mikey Roynan in the neck with a large zombie knife, a type of weapon that is increasingly linked to youth violence in the UK. Though Cunningham inflicted the fatal wound, Bushnell and Knight were present and actively involved. After Mikey was attacked, he managed to walk from the garden to the driveway before collapsing due to significant blood loss. But unfortunately, he did not survive his injuries. Immediately after the incident, the 3 boys fled the scene. CCTV footage later captured them speaking about the attack and disposing of their clothing and weapons. Police later recovered the murder weapon from a nearby drain. The boys were arrested shortly after and charged. The investigation led by Avon and Somerset police revealed that all 3 teenagers had denied the charge of murder. However, during the trial at Bristol Crown Court, the jury found Shane Cunningham guilty of murder. Cartel Bushnell and Leo Knight were both found guilty of manslaughter after being acquitted of the more serious charge. The lead investigator on the crime described the crime as utterly senseless and emphasized the devastating impact it had on both the victims and the perpetrators' families. "Justice has been served," he said, "but it does not bring me or my team any satisfaction." In victim impact statements read out during sentencing, Mikey Roynon's family shared their overwhelming grief. His mother, Haley Ryle, stated that her life changed the day her son was murdered. His grandmother, Teresa Owen, tearfully stated that she would swap places with Mikey in a heartbeat, if she could. The sentencing took place in March 2024, and the judge sentenced Shane Cunningham to life in custody, with a minimum term of 16 years before being eligible for parole. Cartel Bushnell was sentenced to 9 years in detention for manslaughter. Leo Knight received a sentence of 9 years and 6 months. The judge also lifted reporting restrictions, allowing the identities of the 3 teenagers to be publicly released for the first time. He described the case as part of a growing plague of knife crime that continues to take lives and devastate communities. As of May 2025, Cartel Bushnell has served just over 1 year of his 9-year sentence. He was 16 at the time of the crime and will be 25 years old at the time of his scheduled release, if he serves his full sentence. Number 4, 16-year-old Logan McPhail. Logan McPhail was 16 years old at the time of the murder of 15-year-old Holly Newton. He was a teenage resident of Gateshead, England, and attended a special education school in Tyneside due to autism and a low IQ. McPhail had previously been in an 18-month relationship with Holly Newton, a student from Haltwhistle, Northumberland. The two met while participating in Army cadets. After a period of dating, Holly decided to break out of the relationship. After their relationship ended, McPhail struggled to accept the breakup, and his behavior became increasingly concerning to those around them. On the evening of January 26, 2023, the day before the attack, McPhail left his home in Gateshead and traveled over 40 miles to Holly's residence in Haltwhistle. He loitered near her house until local police located him at approximately 1 a.m. and returned him home. His mother had reported him missing earlier that evening. Holly's mother, Michaela Trussler, had been aware of his past troubling behavior and advised her daughter to stay inside the following day if he was seen nearby. Despite this, on January 27th, the next day, McPhail left school early and took a bus to Hexham. There, he began following Holly around the town center as she spent time with friends. McPhail was seen on CCTV wearing a mask and a baseball cap. He approached Holly at a bus stop and asked to speak with her privately. Though visibly unhappy, she eventually agreed and followed him into an alleyway near a pizza shop. At approximately 5 p.m. in that alley, McPhail launched a sudden and violent knife attack. He had brought a kitchen knife from his home. Within less than a minute, he brutally used the knife and slashed Holly 36 times. 12 of those were stab wounds, 19 were slash wounds, and 5 were defensive injuries to her hand, suggesting that she tried to resist. A teenage boy who heard Holly's screams ran to intervene. McPhail used the knife on him as well, wounding him in the process. Bystanders and shop workers attempted to help, and emergency services were called. Holly was taken to the Royal Victoria Infirmary in Newcastle, but unfortunately she was later pronounced dead. Logan McPhail was then arrested at the scene. He was later charged with the murder of Holly Newton and the wounding with intent of the teenage boy who tried to intervene. He pleaded not guilty to murder, instead admitting to manslaughter on the grounds that he had not intended to murder Holly, claiming that his mental state had deteriorated and that he had originally brought the knife to use on himself. His trial began in August 2024 at Newcastle Crown Court. Due to his learning difficulties and diagnosis of autism, he followed much of the proceedings remotely from secure accommodation. Prosecutors argued that McPhail had acted out of jealousy and an inability to cope with rejection. The jury was presented with evidence that McPhail had stalked Holly and had been upset that she was seeing someone new. After deliberation, the jury convicted McPhail of murder and the wounding with intent of the second victim. The judge cited the seriousness of the crime and the broader national conversation about knife violence and violence against women and girls as reasons for naming the defendant. During sentencing, The court noted that MacPhail had never previously been convicted of any crimes. His autism and low cognitive functioning were acknowledged, but did not exempt him from full accountability for his actions. The judge emphasized the premeditated nature of the attack and rejected the claim that the attack had not been intentional. Logan MacPhail was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years. This means he will become eligible for parole at the earliest in 2039. As he was 16 years old at the time of the offense, he would be 32 by the time of possible release, assuming no parole is granted earlier or delays occur. Following sentencing, MacPhail did not make a formal apology to the court or to Holly's family. As of March 2025, Logan MacPhail remains in custody at a secure youth detention facility, having served just over 1 year of his life sentence. Number 5. 16-year-old Thomas Wei Huang. On June 9, 2023, a violent attack occurred at Blundell's School, a private boarding school in Tiverton, Devon. The perpetrator was Thomas Wei Huang, a 16-year-old Malaysian student. His victims were 2 male dorm mates aged 15 and 16, and a housemaster, 38-year-old Henry Roff Sylvester. Thomas Wei Huang had arrived in the UK from Malaysia to attend Blundell's School, following in the footsteps of his older brother. He described being excited to study in a UK boarding school, and reported being generally happy at Blundell's despite disliking sports and the food. Huang came from a wealthy background, and during school breaks, he and his brother would stay in their family's London home in Battersea, rather than returning to Malaysia. On the night of the attack, Huang was wearing only his boxer shorts. Armed with 3 claw hammers, he waited until his 2 dorm mates were asleep in their cabin-style bunk beds. At approximately 1 a.m., he climbed into their beds and launched the assault. The victims suffered extensive and brutal injuries, including skull fractures, internal bleeding, and other critical injuries. The attack was interrupted when housemaster Henry Roff Sylvester was awakened by the noise and went to investigate. He entered the dormitory and encountered Huang, who turned and struck him multiple times over the head with one of the hammers. Mr. Roff Sylvester suffered 6 blows to the head. He managed to stumble back into the corridor and raise the alarm. Another student, hearing the commotion, called emergency services, initially believing there was an intruder on campus. When police arrived, they discovered the 2 boys gravely injured in their beds. Huang was arrested shortly afterward. At the time of arrest, he told officers he had been sleepwalking. In court, Huang admitted carrying out the attacks, but pleaded not guilty to 3 counts of attempted murder by reason of insanity citing sleepwalking and a belief in an impending zombie apocalypse. He stated that he kept hammers by his bed for protection. Huang claimed to be preparing for a zombie apocalypse, referencing shows such as The Walking Dead. He told the court he believed the apocalypse was real and that he needed to be ready to defend himself from vicious creatures. He also acknowledged having 2 mobile phones at school, one of which was hidden so he could use it at night. During the investigation and subsequent trial at Exeter Crown Court, psychiatric evaluations revealed that Huang had been diagnosed with autism. It was also disclosed that he had developed an unhealthy obsession with violence and violent films. Prosecutors described how Huang had planned the attack and had deliberately waited until his victims were most vulnerable. The jury rejected Huang's sleepwalking and insanity defense. In October 2024, he was found guilty of 3 counts of attempted murder following a 10-week trial. One of the boys has since suffered permanent life-altering injuries. Huang was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 12 years. He showed remorse in court, stating, "I feel very terribly sorry for all 3 individuals because of what I did to them. I feel very sorry for everyone, the families and themselves." Initially, Huang's identity was protected due to his age. However, in November 2024, a judge lifted the reporting restrictions after confirming that no further anonymity applications would be made by his legal team. As of May 2025, Thomas Wei Huang has served nearly 2 years of his life sentence. He was 16 at the time of the attack. If released after serving the minimum 12-year term, he will be 28 years old. He remains incarcerated in a UK youth detention facility, awaiting eventual transfer to an adult prison upon reaching the age of majority. Number 6. 16-year-old Stephen Miles. On January 24, 2014, in a flat on Amy Road in Oxted, Surrey, 16-year-old Stephen Miles brutally murdered his girlfriend, 17-year-old Elizabeth Thomas. The crime took place in his family home. Stephen Miles was an A-level politics student at the time of the incident. He lived with his family and had previously been diagnosed with traits associated with the autism spectrum, along with signs of anxiety and narcissistic personality traits. His parents had sought medical and psychological help for him in 2012 after he had an episode. By late 2013, mental health professionals assessed him as having made good progress and discharged him from treatment. On the day of the crime, he invited his girlfriend Elizabeth Thomas to his home after school. It was a routine visit for the couple. Once inside his bedroom, he launched a sudden and brutal attack. He brutally used a knife on her multiple times. After she died, he used saws and other cutting tools from his father's tree surgery business to dismember her body. He separated her body part and hid some under his desk. When his sister returned home about an hour after the murder, he told her that Ed made him to do something bad. Ed, according to Miles, was an alter ego. He said it was a voice in his head that instructed him to murder. He would later claim that Ed was the driving force behind his actions. He did not attempt to flee the scene. Emergency services were contacted shortly afterward, and he was arrested without resistance. During the investigation and subsequent trial, Miles pleaded guilty to the murder of Elizabeth Thomas. The court heard from psychiatric experts who stated that Miles was not psychotic and did not suffer from any mental disorder. Instead, they concluded that Ed was likely a manifestation of anxiety or a dissociative experience. Prosecutors and mental health professionals both confirmed that Miles had a long-standing fascination with horror films and had expressed admiration for the fictional character Dexter Morgan from the American television show Dexter, who was a forensics expert who lives a double life as a serial killer. Miles had expressed a desire to emulate Dexter, and, according to the court, he had internalized the character's dual life. In the trial held at Guildford Crown Court, the prosecution argued that the murder was premeditated. It was presented that Miles had told a previous girlfriend about fantasies involving murder and had once briefly attempted to choke her. The presiding judge described the crime as one of utmost gravity, with features rarely heard in any court. He ruled that Miles would serve a mandatory life sentence with a minimum of 25 years before being eligible for parole. The judge explicitly stated that had Miles been an adult, he would have considered imposing a whole life term. Miles remained silent during the sentencing, dressed in a white shirt and black tie, and showed no visible emotion. The judge warned the courtroom in advance about the graphic nature of the case. Elizabeth Thomas's family was present and later issued a public statement describing her as kind, caring, and gentle. Defense counsel characterized the murder as chilling and blood-curdling and stated that Miles's actions had likely been influenced by media depictions of violence. He acknowledged that while the presence of the alter ego Ed was not fully understood, psychiatrists agreed Miles had no valid psychiatric defense for diminished responsibility. Following sentencing, Miles was transferred to a secure facility. He was imprisoned at HMP Swinfen Hall, a prison in Staffordshire that holds young adult males. The facility provides psychological support, education, and vocational training. His case remains under periodic review as part of the standard life sentence protocol. As of March 2025, Stephen Miles has served 11 years of his sentence. He remains incarcerated at HMP Swinfen Hall. He was 16 years old at the time of the murder, and will be 41 years old at the earliest possible date for release consideration in 2039. Number 7. 17-year-old Hassan Sentamu. On the morning of September 27, 2023, 17-year-old Hassan Sentamu fatally stabbed 15-year-old Eliane Andam outside the Whitgift Shopping Centre in Croydon, South London. The incident took place just after 8:30 a.m. as Eliane was on her way to school. The attack, which unfolded in front of commuters and school children, ended a young life over a dispute involving a teddy bear and personal belongings. Hassan Sentamu, then a teenager from New Addington, had previously been in a relationship with one of Eliane's friends, who remains unnamed for legal reasons. The day before the murder, the two girls saw Sentamu at the shopping center and teased him. This seemingly minor interaction deeply angered Sentamu. He later told a friend he couldn't let the teasing to slide. The following day, a meeting was arranged between Sentamu and his ex-girlfriend for the return of personal items. Sentamu wore gloves and a face covering and armed himself with a kitchen knife. He claimed the purpose of the meeting was to return a teddy bear in exchange for clothes. When he arrived without the bear, a confrontation ensued. Eliane stood up for her friend. According to court testimony, she playfully grabbed a bag belonging to Sentamu during the argument. In response, Sentamu chased Eliane, tackled her, and brutally used the knife on her multiple times as she lay on the ground. Witnesses reported that she pleaded for him to stop. Despite her cries, he continued the attack, ultimately attacking her fatally in the neck. Emergency services were called immediately, but Eliane was pronounced dead at the scene. Her murder shocked the community and drew national attention. Sentamu fled, but was arrested shortly afterward. During the police investigation, Sentamu claimed diminished responsibility, citing autism spectrum disorder as a factor that impaired his ability to control his emotions. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter, but denied murder. However, a jury at the Old Bailey rejected his defense and convicted him of murder by majority verdict in January 2025. The court learned that Sentamu had a troubling history of violence. At age 12, he had received a police caution for bringing a knife to school. Other behaviors included putting girls in headlocks, making violent threats, and acting aggressively toward animals. After being taken into custody following Eliane's death, Sentamu continued to display disturbing behavior. While held at Oak Hill Secure Training Center in Milton Keynes, he assaulted another detainee. In one incident, he told a fellow detainee that he would do it again, and threatened to murder the other child's mother. In another, he attacked a child in the face, knocking him down. At his sentencing on March 13, 2025, the judge sentenced Sentamu to life in prison with a minimum term of 23 years. She also imposed a concurrent 1-year sentence for illegal possession of a knife. In her remarks, the judge Bold confronted him, stating that Eliane was 15 when he murdered her, and she will always remain just 15 and never realize the potential of her life. The courtroom heard victim impact statements from Eliane's family. Her mother described her daughter as vibrant, creative, and purposeful, saying, "Now the music has stopped, the laughter has gone, all that is left is a deafening silence that echoes through my life." She directly addressed Sentamu, stating, "You brutally murdered her in the most humiliating way in broad daylight, mercilessly murdered her on the floor as she begged for mercy. Your actions were senseless and evil." Her father added that the thought of her final moments torments him, wondering if she was calling out for him, hoping that he would save her, but he wasn't there. He continued by saying that the guilt will weigh on my heart for the rest of my life. After the sentencing, outside the court, Eliane's family voiced disappointment with the sentence. Pastor Mark Rossell, speaking on their behalf, added that the family believed the justice system had failed to reflect the sheer brutality of the crime, and said the sentence left them feeling abandoned and unheard. After his sentencing, he was transferred HMP Belmarsh, a Category A prison in London. As of March 2025, Hassan Sentamu has served less than 1 year of his life sentence. He was 17 at the time of the murder and will be 40 years old when he becomes eligible for release. Number 8. 16-year-old Yura Veribrus. On July 23, 2023, 16-year-old Yura Veribrus fatally stabbed 17-year-old Charlie Kosser at a private summer party held at a farmhouse marquee in Warnham, West Sussex. The attack occurred in a crowded dance floor setting during an event attended by over 100 people. Charlie Kosser had attended the party with friends. He had recently begun a groundsman apprenticeship and was saving up for his first holiday abroad with friends. The atmosphere at the party was meant to be celebratory, marking the end of the academic year. Yarg Bruce arrived at the same party with his own group of friends. During the evening, multiple complaints were made regarding Veribrus's behavior specifically towards a girl at the event. As a result, he and his group were asked to leave the premises. Shortly after, a fight broke out between Veribrus, Charlie Kosser, and 2 other boys on the dance floor inside the marquee. It was during this altercation that Veribrus then brought out a knife and used it on Charlie 3 times. The tragic occurred on a crowded dance floor with many attendees present. After the attack, Charlie was found lying on the grass outside. Friends and partygoers quickly realized that he had been brutally attacked. They immediately called for emergency services, and Charlie was transported to a hospital. On his way to the hospital, he suffered a cardiac arrest due to internal bleeding. Unfortunately, after numerous efforts to stabilize him, he died 2 days later. Veribrus was arrested after witnesses identified him and relayed what they had seen and heard. The murder weapon was never recovered. He was charged with murder and possession of a bladed article. Witnesses testified that Veribrus was seen drenched in blood immediately after the incident. Multiple individuals reported hearing him confessing to carrying out the crime. A guest also unintentionally captured a portion of the fight on video while recording friends dancing under disco lights. The trial was held at Brighton Crown Court. Evidence from witnesses, video footage, and forensic details were presented. The court also heard that Charlie and Veribrus had not previously known each other, and the violence erupted spontaneously during the fight. Though it is unclear whether Veribrus brought the knife to the event himself, the court accepted that he had access to it throughout the night and used it during the confrontation. Veribrus did not take the stand during his trial and denied both charges. On conviction, Yura Veribrus was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years for the murder of Charlie Kosser. He was also found guilty of possession of a bladed article. During the sentencing, Charlie's mother, Tara Kosser, spoke, stating that they have the life sentence, and Charlie has no life. No sentence will be long enough for her child's murderer, emphasizing that the sentence doesn't bring Charlie back to life. She described her son as calm, chilled, and excited about his future. After Charlie's death, the family established a charity called Charlie's Promise and dedicated it to raising awareness and preventing knife crime. Following sentencing, Veribrus was transferred to HMP Cookham Wood, a young offender institution in Kent. He did not make a final public statement during the hearing, and there was no visible reaction from him when the sentence was delivered. According to court observations, he remained silent and avoided eye contact with the gallery. As of May 2025, Yura Veribrus is serving his life sentence in a UK prison. He has served nearly 8 months of his 16-year minimum term. If released at the earliest possible date, he would be 32 years old, having committed the crime at age 16. Number 9. 14-year-old Bardia Shojafard. Bardia Shojafard was 14 years old when he carried out a fatal knife attack on fellow teenager Alfie Lewis. The incident took place on the afternoon of November 7th, 2023, on Church Road, outside a primary school in Horsforth, Leeds. Shojafard, who had no prior criminal record, lived with his family in Leeds. He was described in court as being from a supportive home and as an outwardly normal teenager. However, law enforcement and trial proceedings later revealed that he harbored a long-standing interest in knives, with several photos of him posing with blades found on his mobile phone. On the day of the incident, Alfie Lewis, also aged 15, was on his way to meet some friends after school. Witness testimony later confirmed that Shojafard approached him deliberately and without warning. Armed with a 13-centimeter kitchen knife, which he had taken from a drawer at home and carried with him throughout the school day, Shojafard confronted Alfie outside St. Margaret's Church of England primary school. Eyewitnesses, including schoolchildren, staff, and bystanders, saw the two teenagers in a brief interaction. Alfie was seen backing away, saying, "Chill out," and "What are you doing?" before Shojafard pushed him to the ground and used the knife on him twice, once in the leg and once in his vital organ. The latter wound pierced Alfie, causing fatal internal bleeding. Shojafard fled the scene immediately after the attack and discarded the knife nearby. Emergency services responded quickly, and Alfie was transported to the hospital. Despite efforts to save him, he died a short time later. Shojafard was arrested at his home approximately 1 hour after the incident. The recovered knife was matched to a kitchen set at his residence, and traces of Alfie's blood were found on the blade. He was charged with the murder of Alfie Lewis. During the investigation, police found multiple images on his phone featuring knives, including one edited image showing a blade photoshopped into his hand. One of the pictures had been taken during a family trip to Iran. The knife used in the attack had its handle painted black, suggesting a level of premeditation. At trial in May 2024, Shojafard pleaded not guilty to murder, claiming self-defense. He testified that Alfie had previously threatened him, referring to a Halloween encounter in which Alfie allegedly said, "Give me the bag or something worse than last time is going to happen." Shojafard stated that he felt threatened and began carrying a knife for protection. However, the prosecution presented evidence suggesting that the attack was deliberate and without immediate provocation. The jury at Leeds Crown Court unanimously found Shojafard guilty of murder. On July 12, 2024, the judge sentenced Shojafard to life detention with a minimum term of 13 years. During sentencing, the court heard victim impact statements from Alfie Lewis's family. His mother, Heather Lane, described the profound emotional loss of her youngest son, whom she called her little mate. She told the court she would never forgive Shojafard. Alfie's aunt, Emily Lane, criticized the sentence as insufficient and emphasized the family's devastation. In response to the verdict, Shojafard showed limited outward emotion. There was no reported outburst or reaction during sentencing. He made no formal apology or public statement to the court or the victim's family. He was transferred to HMP Wetherby, a facility in West Yorkshire designated for young offenders. As of March 2025, he remains incarcerated at HMP Wetherby. He has served approximately 1 year and 4 months of his sentence. Given the minimum term of 13 years, and having committed the offense at age 14, he will be eligible for release in 2037 at the age of 27. Number 10. 15-year-old Leighton Ames. On the evening of October 3, 2022, 14-year-old Tomasz Olesak was fatally murdered in White Hills Nature Park, Gateshead, by another teenager, Leighton Ames, who was also 14 at the time of the attack. Tomasz Olesak was originally from Poland. He had moved to Gateshead with his family in 2012. Described as kind, respectful, and sporty, he was a popular figure among his peers and known to detest violence. His murderer, Leighton Ames, also 14 at the time, had a known history of disruptive behavior. He had previously been excluded from primary school for threatening to use a knife on a teacher, and later from secondary school for committing arson by setting fire to a plastic window. Images recovered by police after his arrest showed an interest in knives. On the night of the attack, Ames had taken a serrated steak knife from his kitchen and brought it with him as he went to meet his 14-year-old girlfriend. As they walked together through White Hills Nature Park at around 8 p.m., a group of teenagers began following them. Ames claimed he brought the knife for reassurance and carried it in his jacket pocket. However, evidence disputed this claim, stating that he was the aggressor and had not suffered any significant injuries, only a minor thumb wound. According to him, he was punched and kicked by the group and claimed he pulled out the knife during the attack in self-defense. During the confrontation, Ames attacked Tomasz once with the knife, causing an 8-centimeter deep wound that fatally injured him. After the attack, Ames reportedly shouted, "I've wetted your boy," to the group of youths, a statement described by the judge as being delivered triumphantly. Following the stabbing, Ames also slashed the coat of another boy in the group and was later convicted of attempted grievous bodily harm for that act. He admitted to carrying a knife, but denied the charges of murder, claiming he did not know he had used the knife on Tomasz. After the incident, he hid the knife in a nearby bush and messaged a friend, stating he would have it melted. Tomasz was rushed to hospital, but died the following day from the stab wound. His mother had been called to the scene and attempted to save her son's life, but was unsuccessful. The police arrested Ames shortly after the stabbing. During the investigation, disturbing images of knives were found on his phone. In a victim impact statement, the victim's mother stated that she regularly had flashbacks to that night, while remembering how she was trying desperately to keep her boy alive. The court also heard about Amy's history of violent threats and disruptive behavior in school settings. At Newcastle Crown Court in June 2023, Ames was convicted of murder and attempting to cause grievous bodily harm. The judge sentenced him to detention for life with a minimum term of 12 years. He also received a 13-month sentence for an attempted charge to be served concurrently. After the sentencing, Ames was placed in secure accommodation where he made progress in his education, improving his reading age from 10 to 13. His educational improvements were noted by the judge, but this did not mitigate the severity of the crime. Tomasz's family, still mourning their son's death, expressed their heartbreak and ongoing grief, knowing that their son's future was taken in such a senseless act of violence. As of May 2025, Leighton Ames has served approximately 2.5 years of his minimum 12-year sentence. He was 14 years old at the time of the crime and will be eligible for release at the age of 26, but will remain on license for life and can be recalled to custody at any time. Number 11, 16-year-old Jordan Rance. On the evening of November 17, 2023, 16-year-old Jordan Rance fatally stabbed 49-year-old Paul Marsh at a flat on Samuel Street in Atherton, Wigan. Rance was at the property with Marsh and several other individuals when a minor disagreement escalated into a deadly encounter. According to eyewitnesses, the argument between Jordan and Marsh grew heated. In the midst of the dispute, Jordan lunged toward Marsh with a knife and used it on him in the shoulder. The blade severed Marsh's carotid artery, a critical vessel that supplies blood to the brain. Witnesses reported that Marsh fell back onto a sofa immediately after being attacked. Jordan and another teen immediately fled the scene, while others at the address called emergency services and attempted first aid. Police and paramedics arrived shortly after 6:08 p.m. and found Paul Marsh unconscious with a critical injury. Despite efforts to save him, he died a short time later. A murder investigation was launched by Greater Manchester Police's Major Incident Team. Jordan, who had fled, was soon identified as the prime suspect. He was arrested and charged with murder. In his initial interview, he claimed that Marsh had pulled out a shiny object and demanded his phone, leading to a struggle. He stated that he had pushed Marsh away and didn't realize Marsh had been injured when he left the flat. This account was later proven false. Jordan had deliberately tried to mislead investigators with the help from a 17-year-old friend who also gave a fabricated version of events to police. Both teens admitted they had coordinated their false story, believing it would make them look good and possibly reduce or eliminate Rance's criminal responsibility. The prosecutor told the court that the friend later admitted, stating that he and Jordan had their story ready if they do get nicked. He continued by saying that they had planned that Jordan will tell the police his side of the story and say his name. Then the police will come to him and he would say the same story, and that'll make them both look good. He claimed that he was Jordan's alibi to get Jordan out of the crime. Evidence also revealed that Jordan and Marsh had met weeks earlier and had a previous altercation. It was confirmed that he posed for selfies with knives and attempted to delete evidence by resetting phones and switching SIM cards. Despite several shifting narratives from him, the court determined the killing was intentional. Investigation also revealed that Jordan was known to have a troubled history, including 6 previous convictions for 18 offenses, most of which were related to driving, and 1 count of wounding with intent. He had been described in court as a young person who had experienced significant life difficulties and was vulnerable to negative influence. He was found guilty of murder at Manchester Minshull Street, Crown Court, in March 2024. On May 8, 2024, he was sentenced to life in custody with a minimum term of 21 years. During sentencing, the judge lifted reporting restrictions, allowing him to be named despite his age. Following his sentencing, Jordan did not show any outward sign of distress, but remained quiet. Through his legal representative, he expressed remorse and acknowledged the irreversible consequences of his actions. However, he maintained that the situation escalated unexpectedly and that he had not intended to murder Marsh. The teen who attempted to cover for Jordan was later charged and pleaded guilty to perverting the course of justice. He was sentenced to a 12-month detention and training order, of which half will be served in a young offenders institution. As of May 2025, Jordan Rance has served 1 year of his 21-year minimum sentence. He was 16 years old at the time of the crime and will be at least 37 years old when eligible for release. Number 12, 19-year-old Axel Rudakubana. Axel Rudakubana was 18 years old when he left his home in Banks, Lancashire, on the morning of 29th July 2024. That day, he carried out one of the worst child-targeted attacks in modern British history. The victims were 3 girls: Alice da Silva Aguiar, aged 9, Baby King, aged 6, and Elsie Dot Stancombe, aged 7. 10 others, including 8 children and 2 adults, were also injured in the attempted murders. Rudakubana began his day by booking a taxi to Hart Street in Southport. His destination was the Hart Space, where 26 children, mostly girls between the ages of 6 and 10, were participating in a Taylor Swift-themed yoga and dance workshop. He was armed with a knife that he had purchased online a few days prior. Upon arriving at the scene, Rudakubana left the taxi without paying and entered the building. Within moments, he began a brutal and sustained attack targeting the young children and adults present. Emergency services responded swiftly after multiple 999 calls were placed from the location. Paramedics and police arrived to a scene of devastation. Despite their efforts, Alice, Bebe, and Elsie were pronounced dead. 10 others suffered serious injuries, but survived. Following the attack, Rudakubana was arrested and taken into custody. A thorough search of his home uncovered a significant volume of disturbing materials. Police discovered ingredients capable of producing ricin, a highly toxic biological agent. They also found a PDF file titled Military Studies in the Jihad Against the Tyrants, the Al-Qaeda training manual, which falls under prohibited possession per Section 58 of the Terrorism Act 2000. Additional evidence showed that Rudakubana had viewed and downloaded violent content online and had conducted extensive research into mass violence and genocide. Ruta Cubana pleaded guilty to all 16 charges against him on the 20th of January 2025 at Liverpool Crown Court. During the sentencing on the 12th of March 2025, he was given 13 life sentences. The judge, Mr. Justice Goose, ordered a minimum term of 52 years before he can be considered for parole. In his sentencing remarks, the judge stated that there were 26 children at the party. All of them were happy and enjoying themselves before the wicked individual targeted those children for the horrific, extreme violence he was intent upon. It was such extreme violence of the utmost seriousness it was difficult to comprehend. It's likely he will never be released and will spend the rest of his life in custody. The case drew national attention, not only for the scale of the violence, but also for the lack of clear motive. Ruta Cubana had grown up in a religious, church-going household and had shown early interest in performing arts. At one point, he appeared in a Children in Need advert dressed as Doctor Who. However, by the time he completed secondary school, he had become increasingly reclusive and withdrawn. Despite an earlier assessment by counter-terrorism officials who had concluded he did not pose a significant threat, following the conviction, Ruta Cubana was transferred to HMP Wakefield, a high-security prison in West Yorkshire, designated for individuals convicted of serious violent crimes. As of March 2025, he has served less than 1 year of his life sentence. Given his minimum term of 52 years, he will not be eligible for parole until 2077, by which time he will be 71 years old. Number 13, Kieran Earnshaw and Luke Gokriger. Kieran Earnshaw, who was 18 at the time, and Luke Gokriger, who was 15, were responsible for the fatal murder of 53-year-old Robert Wilson outside the Thornton and Ross Pharmaceutical Plant on Manchester Road, Huddersfield, on the night of January 16, 2020. Kieran Earnshaw had a known history of violent behavior, including a prior incident in October 2016 when he used a knife on a fellow student twice in the stomach. Luke Gokriger, significantly younger, had not been publicly associated with previous violent crimes, though he was seen associating with older peers and engaging in substance misuse in the weeks leading up to the incident. On the night in question, both boys were under the influence of high drinks and a combination of hard substances, including a synthetic sedative, and they took it alongside vodka and other intoxicants. The incident began when Mr. Wilson, a respected night shift supervisor, exited the factory along with his colleagues Paul Thulis and John Badejo to speak with the two teenagers loitering in the company car park. CCTV footage later revealed that the interaction rapidly escalated into a violent and fatal assault. Without provocation, Earnshaw produced a 50-centimeter blue-handled samurai sword from his tracksuit bottoms and began striking Mr. Wilson. During the prolonged attack, Gokriger could be heard repeatedly requesting the weapon, shouting, "Pass me the shank, pass me the shank." An audio captured from Mr. Wilson's phone call to the factory's security firm recorded both the assault and his pleas for mercy. Gokriger, who took possession of the sword, was heard shouting and indicating that he was aiming for the head. The teenagers proceeded to strike Mr. Wilson more than 100 times, paused momentarily to catch their breath and search his pockets, then jointly resumed the attack. At one stage, both were seen holding the sword together in an attempt to sever the victim's body. Mr. Badejo, who attempted to intervene, was seriously injured during the attack. He and Mr. Thulis were ultimately forced to flee the scene. Police officers responding to the emergency found Earnshaw still using the sword in a sawing motion against Mr. Wilson's body. Earnshaw was tasered twice before being subdued, and Gokriger was restrained using incapacitant spray. Both teenagers were arrested on site and later charged. In interviews, Earnshaw appeared disoriented, slurred his speech, and questioned the reasons for his arrest, citing previous police harassment. He admitted to taking an intoxicant and sedatives. Toxicology tests confirmed the presence of a hard substance, which causes impaired judgment and confusion. At Leeds Crown Court, both Kieran Earnshaw and Luke Gaukrieger pleaded guilty to the murder of Robert Wilson and to causing grievous bodily harm with intent to John Badejo. The court was told that the attack was both prolonged and deliberate. The judge presiding over the case emphasized on the brutality of the act and its lasting impact on the victim's family. Earnshaw was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 22 years. Gaukrieger, due to his younger age and level of involvement, received life with a minimum term of 16 years and 8 months. The judge noted that both defendants had a history of concerning behavior, particularly Earnshaw, whose prior knife offense at school demonstrated a pattern. The court lifted previous restrictions on naming Gaukrieger, allowing both defendants to be publicly identified. Neither Earnshaw nor Gaukrieger spoke during the sentencing hearing. However, the court acknowledged a letter of apology had been submitted, in which one of the teenagers described the incident as the worst night of his life. Both individuals were placed in separate secure facilities upon sentencing. Kieran Earnshaw was initially held at HMP Leeds before he was transferred to HMP Frankland, a Category A prison. Luke Gaukrieger, due to his age, was first detained in a youth offender institution and later transferred to an adult prison facility upon reaching 18. As of March 2025, Kieran Earnshaw has served just over 5 years of his life sentence at HMP Frankland. He remains incarcerated and will not be eligible for parole until at least 2042, when he will be 41 years old. Luke Gaukrieger has served just over 5 years and is currently held in HMP Moreland. He will not be eligible for release until at least 2036, when he will be 32 years old. Both remain in custody. Number 14, 18-year-old Leandro Lopes, on the evening of April 27, 2023, in a residence on Elliott Drive, Felling, Gateshead, 18-year-old Leandro Lopes, alongside 17-year-old Jordan Tams and 15-year-old Cretia Beyonce Stroud, carried out a fatal attack that resulted in the murder of 40-year-old Gary Belfield and the attempted murder of his son, Luke Williams. Leandro Lopes was 18 years old at the time of the offense. He had moved to the United Kingdom from Portugal at the age of 7 and was raised in Biker, Newcastle. He experienced a troubled upbringing, reportedly surrounded by criminal influences and subjected to bullying throughout his youth. Lopes had a known history of violence, having previously taken part in attacks with local gangs targeting lone individuals. His background was described during the trial as one shaped by instability and exposure to normalized violence. Jordan Tams, 17, was from Wesley Court, Felling. He had been found previously in possession of a knife and had boasted in messages about wanting to use the knife on others. Cretia Stroud, 15, was from Eastcote Terrace, Walker. She had no prior criminal convictions, but was described as having experienced abandonment, abuse, and exploitation throughout her life. According to evidence presented at Newcastle Crown Court, the attack was premeditated and motivated by a personal dispute. Prosecutors stated that Stroud orchestrated the assault after alleging that Luke Williams had assaulted one of her relatives. The plan was described as having something to do with revenge. At approximately 9 p.m. on April 27, 2023, Lopes and Tams arrived at Gary Belfield's home on Elliott Drive, wearing masks and armed with a knife and a screwdriver. They entered the property while Stroud remained outside. Inside, they launched a coordinated and violent attack. Gary Belfield, a father of 6 who had recently moved to Tyneside from Manchester, was brutally used a knife on multiple times. He sustained 11 significant injuries, including deep wounds to his thigh and back. He collapsed on a sofa and bled to death at the scene. His son, Luke Williams, who was in his 20s, was also stabbed repeatedly. Despite his injuries, he escaped the property and ran to a nearby garage where a mechanic administered emergency aid, likely saving his life. On the way, he passed Stroud, who appeared visibly surprised to see him alive. Emergency services arrived shortly after, and Mr. Belfield was declared dead at the scene. Williams recovered shortly after undergoing some treatment. All three individuals were arrested and charged with murder and attempted murder. The trial commenced at Newcastle Crown Court and lasted 4 weeks. The jury returned guilty verdicts on all charges in December 2023. During the trial, the prosecution presented evidence including voice messages found on Tam's phone in which he made threats of violence, and testimony suggesting Stroud had acted as the instigator of the incident. Witnesses also recounted the lack of remorse displayed by the defendants, with reports that they laughed and joked during court sessions. Mr. Justice Constable, who presided over the trial, lifted standard reporting restrictions on the 2 younger defendants due to the gravity of the offense. He stated that the attack demonstrated extreme brutality and that Stroud's role, though not physical, was critical. Without her coordination, the event would not have occurred. On January 11, 2024, all 3 defendants were sentenced to detention at His Majesty's pleasure, a life sentence for juvenile offenders. Lopes and Tams each received a minimum term of 26 years before being eligible for parole. Stroud received a minimum term of 20 years. During sentencing, the court heard impact statements from Gary Belfield's father and Luke Williams. Mr. Belfield was remembered as a hard-working Amazon delivery driver and a dedicated father. His father described the murder as senseless and said it had a far-reaching impact on the entire family. Luke Williams said he had no doubt he would have died if he had not escaped. He stated that the attack was intentional and that the intruders asked no questions, indicating a predetermined purpose. He referred to the perpetrators as vile human beings and expressed a hope that they would live a long life burdened by regret. Throughout the proceedings, none of the defendants expressed remorse. Stroud was reported to have boasted about the attack in its aftermath. Lopes remained silent during sentencing and gave no personal statement to the court. Following sentencing, all 3 were transferred to youth offender institutions. Leandro Lopes was sent to HMP Weatherby, a facility specializing in young male offenders. As of May 2025, Leandro Lopes has served just over 1 year of his sentence. He was 18 years old at the time of the offense, and under the terms of his sentence, will not be eligible for parole until he is at least 44 years old. 16-year-old Daniel Haig. Daniel Haig was 16 years old at the time of the incident that led to the death of 14-year-old Justin McLaughlin. Haig, a teenager from the Glasgow area, had a background marked by instability and exposure to violence. By his mid-teens, he was regularly consuming hard substances and intoxicating drinks. He also had prior encounters with law enforcement, including his attack on a man with a garden fork, and had previously been caught carrying a knife. On the afternoon of October 16, 2021, a confrontation occurred at High Street Railway Station in Glasgow between 2 groups of teenagers. Haig, carrying a knife in his rucksack, arrived at the station around the same time as Justin McLaughlin and his friends. CCTV footage showed Haig running toward the group. A clash broke out during which Haig pulled the knife from his bag. In the commotion, the knife was dropped onto the railway track. Haig jumped onto the tracks, retrieved the blade, and rejoined the confrontation. As the group scattered, Haig pursued them along the platform. As they were running, Justin McLaughlin tripped and fell. As he tried to stand back up, Haig ran up to him and used the knife on him once in his vital organ. The wound penetrated so deep and caused severe harm to Justin. Friends of the victim tried to assist him, and he was heard pleading for his mother. Emergency services transported him to hospital, but unfortunately, he did not survive. The incident was captured on station surveillance, providing clear evidence of the sequence of events. After the attack, Haig fled the scene and later disposed of the knife in a bin. He was arrested shortly after and charged with murder. During the trial at the High Court in Glasgow, he admitted to using the knife on Justin, but denied any intent to murder him. His defense argued that the knife had been carried for self-protection, claiming that his client had been assaulted the day before the incident. Haig stated that he aimed for the lower abdomen and intended only to cause a minor injury. When asked by his defense counsel how he felt about the incident, he expressed remorse, telling the court and Justin's family, "It was never my intention to murder anybody." However, prosecutors argued that his actions demonstrated clear intent to cause serious harm. They emphasized that after the scuffle had ended, Haig was no longer under threat, but chose to pursue and murder the unarmed boy. The jury found Daniel Haig guilty of murder in June 2023. The sentencing took place at the High Court in Edinburgh. The judge presiding over the case imposed a life sentence with a minimum term of 16 years before parole eligibility. He described the act as a brutal murder and highlighted its devastating effect on the victim's family. The judge noted that Justin was in a defenseless position when the fatal blow was delivered. During the sentencing, Justin McLaughlin's family described him as the blue-eyed boy of the household. His younger siblings were particularly affected by the loss. He was their best friend, as well as a brother. The family stated that their lives would never be the same, citing knife crime as the cause of their devastation. Following the sentencing, Haig was transferred to HMP Polmont, a young offenders institution in central Scotland. As of March 2025, Daniel Haig has served approximately 3 years of his life sentence. He was 16 at the time of the crime and 18 at the time of sentencing. He will be eligible for parole at age 32, having served the minimum 16-year term. 19-year-old Daniel Harris. From February 2021 to March 2022, Daniel Harris, a teenager from Glossop, Derbyshire, uploaded a series of far-right extremist videos to the internet. He was 17 when he began producing this material, posting under the alias Bookanon on platforms like World Truth Videos. Harris created and shared videos that promoted violent ideologies, glorified mass shooters, and encouraged viewers to commit acts of terror. The content of these videos included praise for several known extremists. One video celebrated Thomas Mair, the man who murdered British MP Joe Cox in 2016. Another video referred to Brenton Tarrant, the Australian who murdered 51 Muslims during the Christchurch mosque shootings in New Zealand, as a saint. He also called for the total extermination of subhumans, a phrase repeated across his published content. These videos did not remain in obscurity. One of them, titled How to Achieve Victory, was later shared online by Peyton Gendron, who went on to fatally shoot 10 black people at a supermarket in Buffalo, New York, in May 2022. Prosecutors noted that Harris's videos were influential, with Judge Patrick Field KC stating during sentencing that Harris's materials had, at the very least, some influence upon Gendron. Authorities also discovered links between Harris's online content and Anderson Lee Aldrich, the suspected gunman in the November 2022 shooting at a gay nightclub in Colorado Springs that left 5 people dead and 25 injured. One of Harris's videos appeared on a platform closely tied to Aldrich's online activity before the attack. Harris's actions gained the attention of UK counter-terrorism policing. Detectives opened an investigation after finding that Harris had attempted to manufacture a firearm using a 3D printer. The court heard that while he was unsuccessful, the attempt represented a clear intention to carry out violence. The investigation revealed that Harris had been referred to the UK's PREVENT program, an initiative designed to intervene in early-stage radicalization. However, he continued to produce and disseminate extremist content throughout his participation in the program. Authorities ultimately determined that Harris had not been groomed by others, but was instead acting independently with the intent to radicalize others. Detective indicated that on the surface, Harris presents as an unassuming, quiet young man, but when you scratch the surface and it's a more sinister picture. He added that Harris's consistent online activity posed such a threat that they had to act in order to ensure the safety of the wider public. Harris was arrested and later charged with multiple terrorism offenses. In December 2022, he was convicted of 5 counts of encouraging terrorism and 1 count of possession of material for terrorist purposes. The possession charge stemmed from his attempt to create a gun using a 3D printer. During sentencing in February 2023, the judge described Harris as highly dangerous and a propagandist for an extremist right-wing ideology. He noted that Harris had shown no remorse and had lied about his past actions, even describing his defacement of a George Floyd memorial in Manchester as no more than a blip. The court also heard about Harris's background. He had been withdrawn from mainstream schooling at the age of 7, and his defense lawyer argued that there were quite disgraceful failings by his family and the local authority in handling his upbringing. On February 3, 2023, Harris was sentenced at Manchester Crown Court to 11.5 years in a young offenders institution. Upon release, he will serve an additional 3 years on extended license under supervision. As of March 2025, Daniel Harris has served just over 2 years of his 11.5-year sentence. He was 19 at the time of his sentencing and will be approximately 30 years old by the time of his scheduled release. He remains incarcerated in a UK young offenders institution under terrorism-related charges. Thank you guys for watching. Personally, I think these teens deserve the capital punishment they all got. What do you think? Leave a comment below.